Welcome, everyone. We're going to begin our meeting this evening with a roll call from our City Clerk, Kathy Valdez.
The record shall reflect that all members are present.
Councilmember Green, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please stand. Put your hand over your heart. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And our City Clerk has some procedural items.
Thank you. I would like to remind everyone that the Vista Municipal Code requires members of the public to observe order and decorum at the meeting and to conduct themselves in a courteous manner. The ordinance was adopted to allow for public input and to facilitate city business without disruption of the meeting. Students wishing to receive credit for attending this evening's meeting must stay for a minimum of 1 hour. However, we ask that you stay for the completion of the item rather than leaving in the middle of a discussion. When you're ready to leave, you may ask one of the staff members at the back of the room to sign your paper. Thank you.
To speak on an item on the agenda this evening, please fill out a speaker slip with the number of the item that you'd like to speak on and give it to the clerk's staff. Speaker slips are available on the table just outside the council chambers. Speakers will have 3 minutes to address the council. Do we have any speakers that have already indicated they'd like to speak? We'll begin our oral communications now. Any member of the public wishing to address the council on agency-related matters that are not on the agenda may request to speak during this section of the agenda. The number of speakers that will be heard during this segment is limited to 10, and the remaining speakers will be heard under our second oral communications item. And I don't see any in the regular oral communications. I've got one speaker for our discussion item this evening. So with that, let's ask our Housing Services Program Manager, Jonathan Lung, to provide the staff report, and then we'll take speakers on this item.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. My name is Jonathan Lung, and I'm the Homeless Services Program Manager. For discussion tonight is an update on the implementation of the strategic plan to address homelessness, which aims to ensure the homelessness in Vista is a rare, brief, and one-time experience, and in the case of chronic homelessness, moves people into shelter and connected to services as soon as possible. This presentation will be divided into 2 sections with an opportunity for council questions and feedback at the end of each section. We'll begin with a timeline of milestones for the implementation of the strategic plan, which was adopted in March 2020, and service providers contract in August 2020. In September 2021, a part-time housing navigator was added to the social work staff, and the downtown daytime outreach program was removed from the plan. In March 2022, the city received $1.8 million of encampment resolution grant funds from the California Interagency Council on Homelessness to provide focused outreach and land restoration in and around the Buena Vista Creek and watershed areas, which is designated as a Biological Preserve Overlay, or BPO. In September 2022, the Housing Navigator was increased to a full-time position, and a community health worker was added to the social work staff. Most recently, in April of 2023, the Safe Parking Program was approved with an anticipated program start time later this year in August 2023. Current funding sources in support of the strategic plan include Encampment Resolution Funds Round 1, or ERF 1 through Cal ICH, Vista Year-End Fund Balance, Permanent Local Housing Allocation, or PLHA, through HCD, Housing Set-Aside Funds from the Vista Successor Agency, and one-time state budget earmark funds. This chart describes the total funds contracted and spent in support of the 3 strategic plan goals. $355,000 has been contracted to prevent homelessness, $440,000 contracted to improve quality of life, and $2.3 million contracted to reduce homelessness. These funds are contracted and administered to address homelessness with various agencies, including the city's Public Works Department, Jewish Family Service of San Diego, Exodus Recovery, the Alliance for Regional Solutions, Interfaith Community Services, Elder Help of San Diego, and North County Lifeline. The strategic plan utilizes 7 strategies to realize these 3 strategic plan goals. These are the Internal Homelessness Working Group, Encampment Cleanup, Homelessness Prevention Pilot Program, Home Share, Governmental and Legislative Advocacy, Securing of Shelter Beds, and Social Worker Outreach. Tonight's updates since the last strategic plan update include the addition of non-city contracted service providers to the Homelessness Working Group, improved fencing surrounding the Hacienda BPO, application to the second round of ERF, and the implementation of the Safe Parking Program. As previously mentioned, since the last strategic plan update in December 2022, various service providers not contracted with the city but operating within city limits have been included in the Homelessness Working Group. Their inclusion promotes better cooperation and coordination of all services provided to our unsheltered neighbors and helps identify unmet needs among city departments and outside agencies. Recent meetings have resulted in a new collaboration between the City of Vista and the San Diego Homeless Court Program, with the Homeless Court Pop-Up Resources Fair being hosted in Vista later this year on October 18th, 2023. The working group had also identified an opportunity to increase efforts on and around Sycamore Avenue for encampment cleanups. Permanent notice of cleanup signage has allowed city crews to clear obstructions created by encampments to the public right-of-ways and partner with the San Diego County Sheriff's COPS teams to enforce trespass violations on adjacent private properties and engagement by Exodus social workers when unsheltered property owners are on site. These signs alleviate the need to post 72-hour notices of property removal after sidewalk obstructions are identified and promotes quick engagement by social workers for services to be offered to our unsheltered neighbors in the area. These signs are illustrated and posted in the areas marked on the map displayed. Regarding encampment cleanup efforts in the remaining areas of the city, between October 1st, 2022 and March 31st, 2023, 268 encampments were reported on private property, 133 of which have been resolved by the property owners. Vista Code Enforcement and Sheriff's Office continue to work with business owners to file trespass arrest authorization letters to address encampments on private properties. 43 tons of trash have been removed from city properties citywide, with 38 of those coming from the Hacienda BPO. The focused efforts in the Hacienda BPO area have resulted in engagement with 100 unique individuals, 31 of which have been placed into either shelter or housing. As reported with the last strategic plan update, Caltrans had installed improved fencing along the state right-of-way border with the Hacienda BPO, but the city's fencing remained vulnerable to trespassers. Since that update, the existing 2 3/8-inch chain link fence has been contracted to be replaced with improved 1-inch galvanized chain link fence that improves the defensibility of the sensitive BPO area. Next is a discussion of the Homelessness Prevention Pilot Program that was funded by a one-time state allocation and provided between August 2020 and August 2022. During the program, $192,000 were administered to support 59 Vista families at risk of homelessness with rental assistance. A parallel rental assistance program was funded by one-time CDBG CV funds to assist Vista residents financially burdened by the COVID-19 pandemic. The CDBG CV rental assistance program administered $143,000 to support 37 Vista families to remain in their homes. Both programs were administered by North County Lifeline. Data based on responses received from rental assistance recipients of both programs show that 88% of families remained in their homes at 6 months after the end of the program, and after 13 months, 75% of families remained in their homes. Both programs have exhausted funding, and staff continue to seek additional funding sources to provide additional rental assistance to Vista residents. The home share strategy of the strategic plan is an increasingly popular way to match people looking for low-cost housing with homeowners in a more formal and accountable manner than with social media or other informal means. Home share coordinators match home providers with home seekers, conducts outreach in the community, locates housing inventory, assists with shared living agreements, and provides ongoing supports to home providers and home seekers. The city's in the third and final year of its agreement with Elder Help of San Diego to provide home share services to expand the affordable housing stock in Vista. The program is open to both renters and homeowners as home providers and requires only one party to match to be a senior. Since the last plan update, a North County Housing Coordinator has been hired and focuses efforts in the city of Vista. I'd now like to invite Sarah Benson, Elder Help Director of San Diego North, to share an overview of their program.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. Thank you for having me back. Thank you. A little quick history about Elder Help. We've been serving San Diego seniors for nearly 50 years, and our mission is to keep seniors living in their homes and communities so that they may age in place safely and with dignity. Elder Help's core programs include information and referral, social connection programs like Are You OK calls, caregiving support, care coordination, including a home safety and maintenance program, nutrition services, a transportation program called Seniors A Go-Go, and housing services, which I'll talk about tonight. Older adults are at the center of our housing crisis. Most seniors want to age in place, but rent is far outpacing our seniors' fixed income. As you can see here, the average rent is higher than the average income for Social Security. Seniors living on low and fixed incomes are forced to choose between paying rent, eating, or buying medications. We hear about these stories daily. It's no surprise that older adults are the fastest growing group experiencing homelessness in San Diego County. 1 out of 4 of San Diego's homeless adults are over the age of 55. And I'm sure as many of you hear from your residents, few options are available. Section 8 wait lists are too long, housing developments are too few, and they take a long time for approval and build out. Enter our Home Share program. Home Share is a roommate matching service that helps both the home provider and the home seeker meet their economical and social needs. Elder Help facilitates the match, and most importantly, we provide support throughout the whole process, from questions about the program through the end of the match and everything in between, the trial period, and we also help navigate any challenges and handle conflict resolution. We have ramped up our team since I last spoke with this group. We have new hires, as Jonathan mentioned. In North County, we now have 2 full-time home share coordinators and a housing navigator. And our team has recently focused on increasing our community awareness to recruit more housing providers. That's always our need. So why home share? Shared housing is a viable solution that can effectively meet the needs of all populations at risk of homelessness. It helps to reduce isolation, and roommates feel safer together. Bringing in a roommate leads to stability. People stay in their homes longer, and it reduces rent. And it also uses existing housing stock. According to the U.S. Census 2020 survey, seniors ages 65 years and over in Vista, more than 1/5 of them have an available room to rent. It's about 22% actually in the city of Vista. Based on this data, we believe there's more than 2,000 available rooms that seniors can rent out in this community. Home share in Vista, we have 1 match and 2 pending providers currently, 19 seekers on the interest list. And we have assisted over 130 with information and referral and housing navigation. The average age of the seekers here is about 64. Most income is pretty low, about $18,000 a year. Majority are at risk of becoming unhoused. Most of those we speak with want rent between about $600 and $800 a month. Home share is really the only option for them, if you know anything about the housing market right now. Outreach in Vista, this bar chart on the left shows the growing number of individuals calling from Vista zip codes over the 3 years we've had the contract here. The bars on the right illustrate how our outreach efforts have grown over those years as well. We focus on about 5 to 10 touch points each month through our outreach efforts, focusing on senior communities, senior center, churches, other community resource opportunities, such as resource fairs, service clubs, and any other group we can get in front of that might have the potential of touching seniors. Our goal is always to recruit more home share providers through our outreach efforts. And we have a direct mail campaign planned in this community that'll reach over 9,000 households. What our clients report, they feel home share has increased their quality of life. Our most recent quarterly survey of participants show that 89% of them report that their home share match actually has reduced their isolation and makes them feel less lonely. We want to continue to grow this program in Vista, and as long as we're given the time to spread the word, we believe that we can impact more seniors and recruit more home share providers. Thank you.
Okay, actually, before we do our first speaker, we're going to ask if the council has any questions on what's been presented so far. Councilman Green.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the presentation to date. Jonathan, I really appreciate your presentation. Knowing that $335,483 has affected 294 Vista residents through that North County Lifeline program, that seems so effective. And I'd love to see kind of a way that the council can allocate funds. When you look at the millions of dollars we allocate and the actual number of people that we affect, I mean, that was 294 Vista residents. So between the two, you know, that program was super effective. So that's something that I definitely support and would like to see us find a way to find funding. I don't think we need, with the millions of dollars that we receive, I think we can allocate funds to this program if we have to shift funding to somewhere else. So that's something I'd like to see you concentrate on. It's good to know the Safe Lot is opening in August. Question, is it gonna be on the library side of the facility here? Did we confirm that already?
Yes.
Okay, and do we know what day in August or just by the end of August?
We'll say the end or
By the end of August?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. And I like the signs that you put up, the notice of trash cleanup Tuesdays and Fridays. Does that help us as far as the state laws go where we can, I mean, basically clean up the right-of-ways with those signs posted?
Yeah, absolutely. So those signs alleviate the need to post the 72-hour notices that
Okay.
we do in general. It kind of serves as a perpetual notice. It allows us to stay on top of the encampments that we tend to find in the Sycamore area. It would seem that the encampments tend to grow exponentially rather than uniformly, I suppose. So staying on top of it has proven to be pretty effective in maintaining the cleanliness of the right-of-ways.
And I've seen Caltrans has done a lot of work under the bridges just from a topography standpoint and kind of like, hey, it's really not conducive to sleep in a lot of areas. Have they posted any type of signs similar to ours, or have we reached out to say, is there any type of signs they can post to say, hey, every Wednesday Caltrans comes through here or whatever?
We have discussed that possibility with Caltrans. They do visit Vista every Tuesday and Friday. That's our schedule actually is meant to parallel with their
Okay.
schedule so that we're in the same areas at the same time.
Okay,
We weren't able to implement our signs in their right-of-ways. We've suggested that they do,
okay.
but that remains a conversation.
Okay, and we're not allowed to encroach on their right-of-ways without their authorization?
Correct.
Even if we put our sign, we're not even allowed to put our signs in their right-of-ways
Not
without their
even allowed to,
authorization?
correct, yeah.
Okay, so that's still going to continue to be a battle that I know Councilmember O'Donnell has been fighting over there on the Sycamore area, so that's good. The question I had about the internal working group, I'm so glad that there was actually a diagram of the internal working group and who it's made up of. Is there a standard date of when their actual meetings occur? And are those meetings open to the public, or are there minutes kept from those meetings that are reviewable?
Yeah, they are held bi-monthly, so it's the last Thursday of every other month.
Last Thursday.
From 2 to 3:30 p.m. They're not public meetings, but we do keep agendas and minutes.
Okay. And if somebody from the public wanted to see the minutes of those meetings, is there a place online they can find those minutes, or is that
They're not
something we haven't posted quite yet.
posted publicly. I'd imagine they might go through the clerk's office.
Okay.
But we could make it available to them if we were directed to do so.
Yeah, I'm just thinking I'd love to see kind of what they're working on, and kind of what their suggestions on. If you're like, hey, there's a meeting, and, maybe even send it out to council or whatever, say, hey, this is what they talked about, so we kind of know what's on the forefront would be awesome. Absolutely. So that's that. And then I don't know if this would be for the home share elder help representative or not, but I understand it's our third year under contract with you. Is that correct? And when I'm looking at the actual numbers here, I do see that you spoke with some Vistans, 133 Vistans. The question I have is, it looks like we have one match in one property. And we paid like $90,000 to date for one match in one home. Okay. And for me, I would say it's not that successful to date. I see that there's 19 home seekers, which makes me think there's not a lot of seniors who have opened up their homes. And if after 3 years we haven't been able to find any homes that are available and we still have 19 seekers on the list, it's a great idea. It would be fantastic if it would work. But I think maybe, if we can help 294 Vistans with 300,000, maybe if we put that extra 90,000, we could help another 50 Vistans, So I'm really into making sure that the money's doing good work for the community, and I don't know how we can increase that number. I've seen your presentation before, and I love the idea, but it just seems like there's not a demand from the senior side to open their houses up. I'm willing to hear your input to it, or is that just kind of what you're running into as well, is that there's no seniors signed up to have you approve their houses? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely. Finding home providers is certainly the biggest challenge. And keep in mind, it was the pandemic during the last 3 years. So we, on average, have about 30 matches through Elder Help each year. And that number went down to 0 the first year of COVID. And then it was, I think, 4 and then 6 recently. So we are seeing a slow increase, a slow interest coming back for home providers, but that's certainly been the biggest challenge and where we spend the most of our time on outreach. It'll be interesting to see if our direct mail campaign yields some new interests. I think 9,500 households in Vista are receiving a direct mail postcard from Elder Help, speaking directly to the need for home providers. So that could result in more. But yes, we currently have 2 new home providers who have come our way in just the last couple months as a result of our efforts.
Okay.
So
and they're in Vista here, the home providers?
Yes.
Okay.
They are
and you guys have a
Vista
screening
homes.
process, I would assume.
Oh, we
before.
do. Yes.
So that's what you're going through right now?
Yes. The safety of our participants is first and foremost. So we do quite an extensive screening process. I believe the home provider packets and the seeker packets were in the packet for this evening, so there's definitely a lot more information you're welcome to review. But yes, I hear you on that. Finding those home providers is the biggest challenge. We do have a contract with the city of San Diego, and we did see a pretty significant dip over the last couple of years because of COVID, and we see that coming back over just the last couple of months.
Okay, and those 2 homes you have, hopefully they'll be ready to go pretty soon as far as you're concerned for one of those 19 seekers?
Yes, so I can't speak to those specific homes, but they were accepted into the program as a potential provider, and we're just kind of working through the application process with the homeowner at this time.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. I really appreciate your time. Thank you. That's it for me.
Councilman Donald.
So I actually had a few questions as well, if you want to. Please, thank you. So one, thank you for your presentation. I actually agree with Councilmember Green. I think the concept of your idea is fantastic. I was just curious, so on here it said 133 individuals provided information with or resources to. What does that mean?
So our information and referral program will help seniors with any issue they may have. About half of those typically have to do with housing. I don't have all the statistics in front of me, but they may be calling about caregiver support or our care coordination program, home safety and maintenance, or our transportation or nutrition programs.
Awesome. So 105,000 total within the contract. I think we have just over 14,000 left. Can you kind of shed some light on where that money has been spent, if you could, just so we have a better understanding of kind of what actions you've taken Because to have one successful person is, those are not the results that we would hope to have, right?
It's certainly on staff time and outreach. This is very much a grassroots program that requires a lot of back and forth with the interested parties and questions and answers. 21 applicants total on the seeker side. Each applicant works one-on-one with our staff member to identify if they're the right fit or would make the match with the home provider. So staff time is quite intense on this program.
Am I incorrect? I know that you've come before the council before. Did there used to be 2 matches here in Vista?
Just the one.
Just the one? Okay. Okay, I mean, yeah, just for the amount, I would like to see better results, but if I have more questions, I'll let you know. But I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And then for Jonathan, so I know that we have posted the signs in the right-of-way, right? And I want to just thank our deputies for the amazing job they've done on making sure that they're reaching out to the individuals over there. Has it led to any increase in individuals actually accepting assistance?
Not yet, but we're hopeful that it will. It's the signs were just installed a month ago.
Okay.
So it's still a pretty small sample size, but we're hopeful that we'll see better results, with the increased activity in visits to the area.
Okay. And then strategic plan updates. The working group we have, I think, is fantastic. I know we have commissions for everything, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but what about for homelessness? So do we have like a community advisory commission here in the city of Vista? I know the answer, but I just want to hear you say it.
We don't.
Is there any reason for that?
Not other than we're open to that direction.
Yeah. I don't think it'd be proper to agendize it now, but I'd like to have a discussion about that in the future as to why, or the potential benefit of it. I'd like to include you in that just so we can see if there might be any pros or cons to doing something like that. I will certainly have more questions for you, but that'll be later after your presentation. So I appreciate you being here and great presentation.
Deputy Mayor Contreras.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation so far. I kind of want to address some of the questions and issues that have been mentioned by my colleagues, Green and O'Donnell. First, when it comes to the internal homeless working group, this is something, I'm glad that you brought up the minutes. It's something that I originally really wanted to see the minutes. I think that they should be made public. It's critical for folks to understand what's going on in these, not that I think anything nefarious is going on, but we also hold accountability to our constituents, to the residents here in Vista, and I think you all are doing great work having these conversations, but I can't go to bat for you and say that you are. I can only assume that you are, right? So I want to be able to have a little bit more transparency, so I will continue to ask about those minutes, and I think that they should be, to our city attorney, would there be any issue making those minutes, public, part of the public record that you foresee?
Assistant City Attorney Amanda Guy.
Right.
So they would be public records that could be posted online. It's not a Brown Act meeting, so with respect to needing to post per the Brown Act, that wouldn't apply, but they would be public records.
Okay, yeah, I think that there might
If
be.
you'd like to speak, you can draw a speaker card, but this is not the appropriate time to disrupt the meeting. Please draw a card if you'd like to make a comment. You'd be allowed to speak for 3 minutes.
Yeah, I think that there might be a majority on this council that would want to make sure the public has access to those minutes. And one of the groups that I don't see present in this working group is North County Transit District. And I represent the city on North County Transit District, and as chair of one of the committees that addresses kind of customer service, I have forced North County Transit District to discuss homelessness. We know that folks that are experiencing homelessness utilize public transit, and we have the Vista Transit Center, which has a huge asset to the community, which is a public restroom. So we know that folks are accessing this site and they're utilizing public transit. What I can't ever get an answer to is, what does the interface look like between the City of Vista and North County Transit District when it comes to outreach? Because there was a pilot program that the county funded, and the more outreach, the more folks that we see are being connected to services. And sometimes it takes 5, 4, 3, 7 times to communicate with someone, to build that trust, build that rapport, and ensure that we can really do all that we can to connect this individual to the resources that they need. So can you kind of explain a little bit about what our collaboration is with North County Transit District? Because I do see that being kind of a gap in our strategic plan.
Yeah, currently there isn't any active engagement with NCTD with a working group. I think we can certainly reach out and include them in the conversation. As you mentioned, they do a lot of coordinated outreach with the county, and we do have county representatives come to the meeting, so we can certainly get some insight from them as well. But we'll certainly reach out to NCTD and gauge the interest for them to attend our meetings also.
Yeah, definitely. And if you hear that they're not interested, then please let me know, because I will ensure that I advocate even louder on my side, which is telling them that they need to be interested in having this conversation. And I think that they are. As we have more youth utilizing public transit with the Youth Opportunity Pass that is going to continue until next year, I want to ensure that we are addressing security issues, and not to say that folks, who are experiencing homelessness are a security risk. What needs to happen is to ensure that that folks that are experiencing homelessness have access to the resources that they need, including being able to take care of their hygiene. Because what we have seen on the North County Transit District side, listen, I ride public transit all the time, and most of the time, the folks that are a little unruly are inebriated. And a lot of the folks that I've seen, I've gotten to know just by, utilizing the system and seeing folks over and over again. Folks that seem like they're experiencing homelessness, a lot of them are utilizing this service for a variety of reasons, but one of which is that it's safe for them, right? So I see folks, sleeping on the Sprinter and whatnot, but what I would hate to do is to have a missed opportunity to connect that individual with some of the resources that we have and what we've allocated as a council to the strategic plan that is at this point award-winning. So I want to continue being able to leverage our resources and ensure that just because there's this arbitrary jurisdiction difference between the city and NCTD, that arbitrary boundary doesn't exist when we're trying to do the best outreach that we can and connect folks to long-term strategies so that we can make homelessness a brief and one-time experience. So that would be some food for thought.
Well, I'd quickly, too, if I may, Councilmember.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, as noted on this slide, the Homeless Court Pop-Up Resources Fair that's coming up in August, we are currently in communication with NCTD to potentially host that event at one of the lots.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been bugging them to do just a community fair about the different programs that NCTD has and the kind of like the strategic plan to grow and what folks, some of the money that we have from Congressman Mike Levin to make the Sprinter go every 15-minute headways, right? So I think it would be great if we could also utilize some of their properties to have that type of resource. So thank you for letting me know that. When it comes to the BPO, this is just an incredible amount of trash. So, it's heartbreaking on so many different fronts. But I will say that, we're having a discussion about lighting as well. It's not part of this discussion, but when we are looking at safety and security for our community, lighting is a big component of that. I have a lot of, I just have a lot of questions about the Hacienda corridor in itself. I think there's a lot that the city can do to improve the safety and enhance that corridor. I know that, creating some kind of active trail could be really beneficial. It's also very expensive, and there's a lot of invasive species like palm trees and whatnot that we would have to remove. But have we tried to seek any grant funding to be able to do to activate that space a little bit more? Because, it's a great, incredible space, and I think, with a handful of millions, right? It's very expensive. We could probably transform this space and create more recreational opportunities for folks that live in that area, since there's not a ton of access to green space and recreation along the Hacienda corridor.
Yeah, absolutely. So of the 1.8 million that we received in Cabinet resolution funding, roughly 200,000 was allocated for actual land restoration to restore it to its original intended use as an open public space. The remaining allocation is primarily for the outreach services, but we can touch base with the grants writer to see what other opportunities we have to really leverage those funds in creating that area into a more open public space.
Awesome. Yeah. The more of other people's money that we can use to help fund safety here in our community and activate more space that's already there that can't currently be utilized, the better. And in fact, it really is just getting our taxpayer money back at the end of the day. So I think that's great that we've been able to do cleanups and outreach to individuals, but there's probably a lot more that can be done on that front. I want to pivot over to the homeless prevention pilot. When we talk about homelessness, there's a lot of folks that think that we're just wasting our money. And I completely disagree, especially when we can really just have a critical focus on the prevention aspect. So, for less than $350,000, we were able to serve almost 300 folks. That is incredible. And, there was, when we were first starting to discuss prevention in this type of manner, providing assistance directly to families here in Vista and individuals that are, for one reason or another, are about to lose their housing. There's a lot of talk about handouts and whatnot. But clearly, this data demonstrates that when you are able to fill the gap for folks as their finances get tighter and tighter and tighter as inflation continues, and it costs so much to even buy milk and eggs and just the staples, that we as a city with our funding pass-through, essentially from the state, we were really able to help folks and prevent them in a long term from losing their shelter, their housing. So I think this is probably the most successful program that we have seen to date, that we have had as part of our strategic plan to address homelessness. So I would echo what Councilmember Green had to say about it. And I think that we do need to find the funding somewhere to continue this program. It is so minuscule in cost compared to the outcome. So, I really think that we need to identify funding ASAP for that. And hopefully the council as a whole really wants to step up to the plate. And when we have funding before us to decide, what we want to do with it, perhaps with the year-end fund balance or whatever the case might be, that we are able to look at continuing this program. Prevention is key. When is our contract with Elder Help? When does it end?
That expires in August.
In August, okay. I really would love to see a little bit, I'm sure it's just really difficult, but some of those funds could be utilized to help with the homeless prevention pilot, to continue this pilot, remove the word pilot and make it permanent. So I have a hard time seeing a result of one, even though I know how much goes into being able to do that outreach. But, that's about, at $100,000, that's about 100 people here in Vista. And the one thing I want to underscore about the homelessness prevention pilot is that a lot of times when, safe parking comes up or other parts of our strategic plan, people are like, well, you can't, it's going to be for people outside of Vista, and there's some truth to that. But with this prevention pilot, these are folks that live in Vista. So I think it's critical for us to continue funding that. And I know we have money somewhere in this building. We have the money to make this prevention pilot turn into a permanent program. I think for now, that's all I have. But thank you very much.
Councilmember Melendez.
Thank you. When is our opportunity to hear from the speakers in the public?
As soon as you're finished.
Okay, great. So really look forward to hearing from everyone who is participating in this meeting. I would like to say that when it comes to a workshop style meeting, I would like to see our meetings become more collaborative and interactive with the public. Feels very separate up here. We are receiving a lot of awesome information that we have to respond to, but I think that there is an opportunity for us to have more of a true workshop style interactive meeting where maybe we're meeting in the Morris Vance community room. Maybe we can have, tables where community members can come and, and sit and kind of draw out ideas. So I think, that would be really important to me. I have a lot of questions about the content that we already have gone over. But I also just want to kind of start by saying thank you to everyone who participated in the meeting that I held yesterday. I held a virtual meeting that was a community stakeholder meeting to review our update. I see some of the folks here tonight are joined us yesterday and are able to be here tonight, so that's awesome. And there's some good feedback there. So I kind of want to lead my comments with that. I provided a presentation of the updates, right? I was able to answer some questions and we had a bit of discussion. And then we also had a brainstorming session where we had a survey platform. I requested people to input their suggestions regarding the question, what are the tools and resources you believe are important for the strategic plan to address homelessness? And we got a lot of great feedback. So with that, there was a lovely word cloud that was developed from that exercise. So City Clerk Kathy Valdez, could you pull that up? Because I would love to share that with everyone. Just a little visual for the community and for the council that's here. And I also provided meeting minutes of the meeting from yesterday because I think it's really important to just have that as part of the public record. And as we wait for that to come up, I'll go ahead and read some of the suggestions, right, so that they can influence our discussion and our adoption of our strategic plan. Oh, that looks great. Okay, so in response to what are the tools and resources you believe are important for the strategic plan to address homelessness, these are the responses. Emergency housing, community protection, dignity and hygiene resources, feminine hygiene products, clear pathway, food access, mobile health care, job focus, shower facilities, transportation vouchers, long-term affordability, internet access, stable funding, job training, affordable housing, transition from recovery, community spaces, results, tenant protections, improved data, recovery services, more oversight, low barrier shelters, affordable studios, outcomes, metrics, sober livings, tiny home communities, non-congregate housing, definitions, childcare, legalities, studios, and accountability. So thank you everyone who participated in the meeting yesterday and submitted your suggestions. That was something I wanted to do, provide a visualization. To have maybe a little bit more collaboration in the future, I think would be good. I think we could set up in the Morris Vance room and really get people to have more of a back and forth, because based on our rules and our conduct here today, we can't really have a certain level of back and forth. We're restricted in doing that. So thank you everybody for that. I think these are a lot of awesome suggestions, and I think that everything that I heard from people yesterday is definitely going to influence how I go about this conversation today. So thank you, Kathy, for pulling that up. I thought it was pretty with a little heart, so thank you for indulging me in that. I had a question about this portion of the presentation regarding the encampments. So the remaining private encampments, I believe that was 135. How have those been resolved, and what is their status?
So the city's unable, of course, to enter the private property to clear those encampments, so notices of violations are issued to the property owners, and they have 7 days to respond before they're issued a citation. In addition, we do work with the private owners to file the trespass authorization letters that are filed with the San Diego Sheriff's Office, so that cops, deputies can enter the property and clear or engage with the unsheltered neighbors without permission from the owner with each instance. They can do so on a regular basis every 30 days, for which the letter is filed for.
So the remaining 135 encampments have, to our knowledge, they have not been resolved?
Correct.
Or,
They have open cases with code enforcement.
So if there is an encampment on private property that is reported or somehow noticed by code enforcement, then the property owner receives a notice.
Correct.
Okay, and then I'm familiar with this in one part of my district and our neighborhoods in District 3. At one of the storage facilities, there were ongoing encampment issues, and noticing the property owner ultimately was the thing that helped, right? But apparently 135 property owners have not responded to the notice that there's an illegal encampment on their property. So who's ultimately reporting the encampments? Is it sometimes property owners and sometimes neighbors? I imagine that they're, the majority of property owners that are responsible in taking care of, right, the notice that they have to respond to, are aware of the situation. Is it possible that some of the property owners are just not aware of the situation?
It would be possible. There would have been a notice sent to the address they have on file with the city. Of course, that doesn't mean that it was received in their hands. So we do try other methods to contact them, including mail, email, phone calls, every avenue that we have with their contact information on file.
Okay, and then in response to the question of how do we know about the encampments? Is it typically a property owner, or is it also neighbors?
Generally neighbors, community members. The code enforcement cases do tend to be reactionary. There's not active patrolling to identify code violations. And so the majority, if not all of them, are received by report from community members.
Okay, all right, thank you for that information. And then about the posting of continuous cleanups for the was it Tuesday and Friday?
Correct.
I think you and I spoke about this. I want to share it with the team. My concern is that we are getting into a pattern where people are becoming excessively familiar, and we are showing ourselves to be very dependable when it comes to picking up other people's trash, right? So instead of connecting and doing outreach and intervening immediately, there's this pattern that's developed where we've noticed that there's encampments, we'll attempt to do an outreach, But ultimately, the priority is encampment cleanup, and the encampment is cleaned up, and then that continues. And now we're going to be noticing it and having a very systematic, a very coordinated effort, I think, with everybody involved on Tuesdays and Fridays in the Sycamore area. So my thought would be, in this area and in potentially other areas of the community where we're seeing encampments on the public right-of-way or in public spaces, public land, that we really try to put an effort towards the outreach first, because according to the report, within a month's time, after all of this cleanup, a significant amount of trash, there was only one individual that was contacted, not even received services, but contacted with outreach. So I would like to see that be a little bit more, more of a faithful effort with our outreach, maybe going in earlier in the day, right? By the time you're hitting 8 a.m., right, according to this notice, somebody who is sleeping outside, sun is out, we're moving along, we know the city is going to be reliable and pick up the trash, right? So that's where I see us getting into kind of a problematic pattern where I would like to see us do more of that outreach and at least being able to contact people sooner before we're going in and picking up the trash. I know that can be really difficult with scheduling. If there's any way that maybe our COPS team, our outreach workers, all of the different team members that we have that can participate in that outreach can make a earlier in the day effort to connect with people, I think that would help us reduce the just chronicity of some of these encampments, because only one person was contacted, but we know that there has to be a lot of folks involved in that encampment, right? Not one person can create all of that waste. I mean, one person can create a lot of waste, but I believe that there has to be more than one person to be contacted. So I don't know if anybody else would feel what I'm saying, but I would love for us to start our outreach earlier. Rental assistance. I had referenced this the last time we had an update. Instead of a pilot, homeless prevention pilot program, for it to just be a rental assistance program, right? I think even the branding of like homelessness can be concerning to people. They can be off-put by it. Even if they might need rental assistance, they might think, well, oh, I'm not homeless, I'm not gonna apply for that. Even though now we're seeing, right, after 6 months, we have 88% retention. That's awesome. After 13 months, we have 75% retention. That's really, really good. I had no idea the numbers were like that. So if we are going to spend funds to provide something material for people, right, and give them a leg up in a bad situation, maybe they're having economic distress, maybe they're having a health condition, maybe there's some reason why they're in that situation. The top reasons, according to the report, for people experiencing homelessness are housing and income. So if we could intervene at the rental assistance level, that would allow us to prevent homelessness and prevent displacement for a lot of our community members. Now, in speaking with you, Jonathan, you explained that we do have some rental assistance funds available, but it is program specific, it is limited, and it's not necessarily marketed to the whole community. So I would like us to have a rental assistance program that is available to the broad community, because I know people need it. And if we don't prevent homelessness and prevent displacement, then it honestly gets more expensive over time. And I think we've seen that from some of the data that our social worker has collected. The services that are required to address someone's street-level homelessness are much more costly. So I would also support putting funds towards this. There's a couple ways that we can do that, right? We can look at our general fund to put funds towards this. I don't know if anybody else would be interested in that. We could also look at funding sources like HSA, right, which is currently funding Elder Help. And I would like to know a little bit more about housing set-aside funds. Could you tell me a little bit about those funds that are currently funding Elder Help?
Yeah, so as of 2019, I believe, there was legislation passed that allowed up to $250,000 annually from housing set-aside funds to be spent locally towards homelessness services.
Okay.
And so though that was the opportunity that is funding Elder Help, as you mentioned, it was previously identified to fund the safe parking program until that was reallocated to the year-end fund balance.
Okay, so these housing set-aside funds, are these the funds that the city can use to go towards building affordable housing and permanent supportive housing?
It is.
Okay, so we, by the end of the contract with Elder Help, we'll have spent $105,000 to house one person, when we could have been putting those monies into a fund or keeping those monies in a fund that would be part of the building blocks of affordable housing development or permanent supportive housing development. So I do not think that we should continue our contract with Elder Help once it is expired. I don't think that it's successful. I think the funds need to be spent elsewhere to be more effective. And I'm not sure if housing set-aside funds should be used for services outside of material, outside of something, providing housing for the public. I think that rental assistance gets a little bit closer to that, right? So if we use housing set-aside funds for rental assistance, would that be permitted?
I'd have to look into the legislation. I don't know off the top of my
Okay.
head, but we can certainly look into
Let's
that.
find that out, because that gets us a little bit closer to using housing set-aside funds for something material for people. The other question I had was with our PLHA funds. So our PLHA funds are housing funds, housing and homelessness funds, called permanent local housing allocation, right?
Correct.
These funds can be used for the services that we're using them for, right, which is our social worker through Exodus Recovery. That is partially where some of the rental assistance comes in, but it's you have to be program eligible. It's not for the general community. I am not content with using PLHA funds to fund social workers. I think that PLHA funds should go, once again, to providing something material. And if we were to find a different funding source for our social workers, we might be able to have more discretion in how we conduct outreach. When we use PLHA funds, and this is information you gave me, Jonathan, so nobody think that I'm a genius, PLHA funds have restrictions. They have to be used to conduct outreach in a certain way. And I know that our council, we want discretion when it comes to how we conduct outreach, how we implement our strategic plan to address homelessness. So not only do I believe these funds need to be used for something material, they need to be set aside for those affordable housing projects, for those permanent supportive housing developments that actually resolve homelessness permanently for a person. I think that we could even do better by finding a different source of funding for our social worker that would allow us to have more discretion in how we conduct outreach and have more local control. Because these and also another thing, you guys, and this gives me so much grief, I'm sorry, the state of California does not give us enough funding for affordable housing. They give us very little resources for affordable housing. And PLHA funds are funds that we can use for affordable housing. So I really want to press that with our council. One of the things that our group came up with yesterday and was on our word cloud that really stuck out to me was, where is it? Stable funding and also long-term affordability. How are we going to accomplish that if we don't set aside monies to produce those permanent supportive housing homes that will resolve homelessness permanently for someone? Also, within our strategic plan to address homelessness, it's described as a plan that's meant to be a systematic, long-term effort. So using these PLHA funds for outreach, I don't think is conducive to a long-term effort. We need to be thinking 10 years from now, being able to produce what we need to produce when it comes to housing affordability, especially when the state of California is not helping us out at all. So that's my spiel when it comes to how we're going to move the funds around to get our best bang for our buck, right? Priorities for me, definitely want to keep the rental assistance program going. I think that we need to move on from our relationship with Elder Help. I hope that we can understand that. And those are it. That's it for me for now. Thank you.
I'm going to have a question about elder help. So if you wouldn't mind coming down, but before that, I'm going to recognize Deputy Mayor Contreras.
Thank you, Councilmember Melendez. I just want to take a little bit of time here to agree wholeheartedly about the Morris Vance being the community room being probably a better area for us to conduct a workshop of this magnitude. I'm sure if I were to ask folks to raise their hand if they would rather be on a level playing field and have all of us kind of in a more collaborative spirit, we probably would have a lot of hands raised right now. So I think when it comes to our strategic plan to address homelessness, there's a lot of curiosity. There's a lot of folks that have different recommendations, have lived experience, and want to be able to contribute. And I did miss out on the opportunity earlier, so thank you, Mayor Franklin, for recognizing me. But I did want to say that to Councilmember O'Donnell's point about having a commission on homelessness, this is something that I can't remember if it was Councilmember Melendez or myself who brought it up years ago, and we didn't have a council majority that wanted that, but I think it would be great for us to have a conversation, just like we had a conversation about, we're going to have a conversation about an environment commission. I think we should also take the opportunity to have a conversation about a commission on homelessness. We have a lot of folks in our community, I think, that want to step up to the plate and help, either because that's where their heart is, or they have lived experience, or they're a service provider and they have a little bit more insight. I think it would be a great opportunity for us to have a little bit more collaboration directly with our community as a stakeholder. I also want to say that thank you for bringing up the point, Councilmember Melendez, regarding encampments, and for sharing your conversation that you had with our staff, with the entire council, and with the public. I will just agree with Councilmember Melendez that doing the outreach component, if folks are already, if they understand how our clock works, then we got to go off a different schedule, because we want to ensure that we're not just picking up trash, that there is the connection that needs to be made with an individual who is experiencing homelessness. And I do like the comments that you also said about rental assistance, so turning our homeless prevention pilot program into a continuous rental assistance. I wanted to ask, in regards to the PLHA funds, what is it that our social worker could do if I don't know what the restrictions are. So put it that way. I don't know what the restrictions are for the PLHA funds, but if we did have funds to continue the efforts of our social workers connecting with folks, and that wasn't coming from PLHA, but it was coming from, let's just say, the general fund, what would the difference be? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the restrictions that we see with PLHA in regards to rental assistance is that it only provides medium to long term. So that's a minimum of 6 months of continuous rental assistance. According to these families that were helped here and the data that was gathered from them, the average length of assistance was 2.4 months. So we see that the real gap, at least in the majority of the folks we were able to assist with rental assistance funds, was for a very short period of time. And that's not something we would be able to fund with PLHA. PLHA also isn't available to pay for rental arrears, which we often find to be one of the greatest risks a family faces to facing homelessness. So along with some other like move-in costs, stuff like that, that aren't eligible through PLHA, it's not an ideal funding source for rental assistance.
So you're saying that if a family comes to us and they're behind on their rent, the PLHA funds cannot help with that?
Cannot,
That's a critical
Very.
situation where we would want to address, have a separate type of funding to address that gap. So thank you. I wasn't aware of that, so thank you, Councilmember Melendez, for bringing this discussion of PLHA funds to the public. Is that, you know, I'm not an expert in this at all, but that's why I think it's so important for us to be able to move this discussion into the Morris Vance room, because I'm sure some folks out here probably know that, and we can have a much more, just a more dynamic discussion. I think definitely being in this room, you know, it serves a purpose, but so does being in the other room and, you know, having tables out where, you know, we can be a little bit more collaborative in nature. But what about when it comes to our social worker? What's the difference there of having PLHA funds versus different funds?
As far as the staffing goes, it does meet the needs that we have for funding personnel for outreach work. It's primarily the housing costs that are very restricted with PLHA.
Okay. So if our social worker connects with a family and sees that the need is not medium or long-term, but is that short-term, like stopgap, they don't have any funds to draw from to assist with that. So
Correct.
that's what you're saying is the primary.
It's the primary concern we have with
Okay.
funding that work.
Okay, thank you. That's illuminating. Thank you for letting me know that. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Now, if I could, I'd like to ask a question about elder help. So we have I heard 19 and I heard 21 seekers. Has
21 total, so one was matched.
right.
And one moved on and chose to.
So my question would be
participate.
this, what do you feel would be the possibility if we have 19 individuals of maybe helping 2 or 3 of them to find a housing unit together and of matching them together? Is that
We've
something?
done that before, matching seekers together. You know, our model really is set up so that we do need the provider, the home. We do not go out and seek available apartments for 2, but I think if there were 2 that we thought could possibly compatible together, we could make the match there and encourage them to find housing together. I will say that of the 19 that are still currently on the seeker list, we have had our housing navigator reach out to them and connect with them to find out if there are other ways we can assist, kind of a light case management. Some of them have been responsive, some have not returning phone calls. Some also are already working with other social services.
Well, that was actually my next question. But I also wanted to ask you, what's the breakdown of those 19 in terms of how many are housing insecure, how many are unsheltered, how many of them meet the definition?
So off the top of my head, they're all housing insecure. They're all extremely low income and came to us because they need to find an alternative. Several of them either have been homeless or probably may even be homeless today. I don't know exactly in terms of tomorrow homeless or in a couple
I
months.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. So you felt that based on the limitations of the program that the idea of pairing them up and trying to find housing for them was not within the scope, or?
I don't think it's completely out of the question, and Elder Help has done that before, but our contract with the City of Vista was really to focus on finding housing providers and matching housing seekers there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Long, I just want to double back on this idea of of providing outreach before a cleanup. I've personally been involved in a great many encampment complaints and have followed them to resolution. And it's my awareness that both through our COPS team, deputies, as well as our Exodus outreach team, that my understanding is that in every circumstance, both teams respond prior to a encampment cleanup. Is that not correct?
Generally, yes.
Generally, that is correct. Okay. I noticed that we have, just trying to get back to the number of contacts. We had roughly, I want to get the exact numbers, we had roughly 1,000 contacts in year one. We had 2,229 in year two. And I think we've had approximately 1,700 in the first 6 months of this year, meaning that, and this is a full 6-month report,
Correct.
and the cutoff is the end of the first quarter?
End of March, correct.
Okay. So we've got a 59% increase in the number of contacts, is the way I look at it. If we double the number that we've had in the first 6 months, we will have had a 59% increase in actual outreach conversations. So we're definitely not short in conversations. I did notice, and I wanted to ask a clarifying question, we're referring to unique individuals and unduplicated individuals, and the number's not the same. I'm very confused.
Correct. I'm happy to explain it now, but
Please
that
do.
is also coming up later in the presentation from Exodus.
I can't wait to know.
Sure. Okay, that's a great question. So unique clients is really specific to each individual reporting period.
And could you talk right into the microphone?
Yeah, excuse me. So unique clients measures how many unique clients, of course, were
During a
engaged
reporting period.
during one reporting period. Unduplicated means from the moment of program inception to
Got it.
current date.
So one is unique during the reporting period, and one is since inception, which is now 2.5 years.
Correct, yes. So you could have duplicated unique clients within separate
Got it.
reporting periods.
Got it. Totally understand that now. That makes sense. So I did just want to clarify that, and I'm anxious to understand the concern about the one outreach, because as you've said, and as to my awareness, we are offering extensive outreach services prior to every cleanup. We offer that to private property owners, as well as the cleanups that we do on city property. So I just wanted to kind of draw that out and find out what the thought is there. I do have some speakers, and if anybody drew a speaker card and has not brought it forward yet to our clerk staff, if you wanted to speak, please fill out a speaker form and bring it to our clerk staff. And with that, would you, I have Councilmember O'Donnell, would you want to wait until after the speakers? And Councilmember Melendez?
I just had a quick response, if I may.
Please.
My concern with the outreach, I think we're doing a wonderful job in general with outreach, but it's really about the time. I know a number of us have participated in outreach efforts. I've done outreach throughout the region in my previous role working in social services. Many of us have done the point in time count, right? And so it's really about the time of day. So just looking at that isolation of over the past month in the Sycamore area, having one contact when I imagine there are more individuals, I'm wondering if we are able to conduct our outreach sooner. And from my understanding, there has been a specific time where outreach has been conducted. So when is outreach conducted? I know it's before a cleanup, but what time of day?
7 a.m. And a clarifying point, if I may. So the reports that you were referring to with the single contact from the posting of the signs, that is an initiative from the community improvement team, which is city staff. Exodus staff and cops do their own outreach in the area that isn't tracked on that sheet. So that's not
Speaking in the microphone for us.
all the outreach efforts in the Sycamore area.
Okay. If the council is amenable to this suggestion, maybe we can bring back to our internal working group, right, to see if they would be open to discussing the suggestion of modifying their times of outreach to meet people, before sunrise and at times that they're most accessible. So that was really about how we are accessing folks in person, where they're at, and the time of day. So perhaps that's something we can bring back to the internal working group, and they can work out a good solution for their work path for that.
I'm certainly not opposed to that. Can I don't understand. I missed the one contact. Who made the one contact and
So that's for the community.
understand.
Yeah, so the notice of cleanup signs in the Sycamore area, those are visited according to the schedule by community improvement team members.
Right.
That is a separate effort from the regular outreach that Exodus Recovery staff and cops do separately.
So we recorded one outreach where our CIT team
One contact
made a contact.
while they were there visiting the site for camping cleanup. It does not capture the engagements outside of that
And just to
effort.
be clear, the community improvement team or CIT team, they're empowered to offer and connect services, but they are not social workers and they are not primarily tasked with outreach.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Very good. Okay, let's go ahead and take public comment. And we will start with Paul Webster, followed by Thomas McCarter, and then finally Serafima. You each have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Mayor Franklin, members of the City Council. I've reviewed the update on the implementation of the strategic plan to address homelessness and have the following recommendations. First, the city needs to incorporate outcome measures to assist it in determining if it is reaching its primary goals of preventing homelessness, improving quality of life, and reducing the number of people experiencing homelessness. Almost all the data in the update measures outputs, those things that are intended to assist people but don't seem to result in achieving the city's goals. The data provided in the update does nothing to indicate if the city is getting any closer to its goals. Does anything in the update demonstrate that homelessness is increasing, decreasing, or staying the same each month, each 6 months, or each year? The city needs to rethink what it measures to determine if the prevention program, encampment cleanups, and outreach and engagement work reduces homelessness. Second, a proposal for state funding has been made to create 2 shelters on South Santa Fe. The update does not show that demand has exceeded the supply for the 10 contracted shelter beds in the last 6 months. Why build more shelter beds if the demand does not exist? The city is in danger of creating and funding a program that creates more outputs with no indication they will go towards achieving the city's stated goals. My last recommendation has to do with incorporating outcome data in the social worker outreach and encampment cleanup programs. The data provided could be better. Demographic data is worthless in addressing homelessness. The city must require what outcomes have resulted from outreach and engagement efforts. It's nice to know the number of referrals and linkages, but how many resulted in people no longer being homeless? How many people in Vista are untreated for mental illness and addictions? How many referrals are for the same person for different services? How many declines are the result of a lack of agency or ability to accept shelter or treatment? What happened to the majority, 69 out of the 100 in the Hacienda BPO, of individuals in encampments who refused shelter or housing? How many of these individuals have consistently refused services and shelter? How many of them have been referred how many times to what services, and why have they refused? What engagement in law enforcement do these individuals have, and what was the resolution to those engagements? The city and its citizens should know the increases and decreases of the populations living in tents and the safe parking program every month, every 6 months, and every year, and be able to compare the trends. Otherwise, your programs are meaningless management instead of actually working to solve the problem. It is no victory to say that you have served more people this year than last. It is, in fact, the opposite.
Thomas McCarter.
Hi. Well, I just came down to find out what the game plan was, and my problem is, I can't understand most of you. Now, I can see you have microphones in front of you, but a lot of you are actually talking to your fellow council members. You're not talking into the microphone so that the rest of us can understand what's going on. See what I mean? See the difference? And you're the best. I understood everything you said. And I appreciated that. But a lot of you think you're just here, like these people don't even exist, the way you talk to each other. And so I don't fully understand what the game plan is, what I came down to find out about, because I couldn't understand it. Some of you talked really quickly, like you got this, well, and then this is happening, and this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. I was like, whoa, slow down a little. It sounds like you're well-intentioned, got some plans in the works to help people. In my experience, talking to several homeless people, it's not a mental problem. It's like I broke my leg and I couldn't go to work and then I couldn't pay rent, and then here I am. I didn't expect to be here. I actually speak to people when I find them out on the street. And the final question I have is, I've done volunteer work with Solutions for Change, and they're right here. They seem to be doing good work. They seem to be transitioning people out of homelessness into homes, but they're not included for some reason, which I don't understand. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Serafima?
Hi, Mayor, council members. So I'm a little nervous. I've never in my life thought I would do something like this, but please bear with me. My name is Serafima, and I've lived in Tri-City, Oceanside, but my children go to Vista, so I'm always in Vista. I'm a homeless advocate for like 15 plus years, probably more by now. And what I do is I talk to them, I pray for them, I build a relationship, I support them, I meet with them, and they like to be treated like a human being, and so they like to know where they can take a shower and things like that. Like, I think Oceanside has like those vans, right, that come certain areas. There's not enough of that, I don't think. The dinners is very interesting because they really start to share, like what the gentleman said, what they've been through, what they're going through, what their struggles are, and things like that. And they oftentimes are very unique. And then after the meetings and the chats, I'm constantly following up with them as individuals. Then after that, that's where I talk to them about solutions, to what solutions are out there. So sadly, 211 doesn't work. I'm not sure what kind of feedback you all are getting about 211. It just does not work. I'm an engineer. I have an electrical engineering degree from San Diego State, and you would think with a degree I'd be able to try to help them find the solutions that are available. I cannot. I could spend hours, days, weeks, and actually sometimes even months trying to help them find a solution. It's very, very challenging. My questions that I have, I know I have a minute left. No active engagement, I think that was mentioned here. I've been visiting a lot of different city councils, specifically in El Cajon. They have like a lot of services there that I think maybe having like a regional solution might be something to look at. They have a program called Home Start. They actually, they claim that they know their homeless people, all their homeless people by name. That was really shocking to me. I had some questions on the youth transportation side of things. I think parents should know that the children are taking youth because you have like a three-prong approach, right? Preventing, and the prevention part is maybe they're starting off really, really young and then they end up homeless, but then the parents don't even know they're on these rides. Regional solution, is there a transportation or a van that could be, is there one right now so people can take them?
Thank you. I'm going to offer a few thoughts. With regard to the home share program, clearly housing one person for $100,000 is not acceptable. And so I have to agree with my colleagues' recommendation to end the funding for that program. I would like us to see if we can, through our housing navigator, connect with those seekers and see if perhaps it's possible that we could put some of them together and that perhaps together, if they can combine their ability to afford, perhaps they would be able to achieve housing security. I'd like to see us have a better scorecard. We've done that before, and all the information's here, but a little bit of effort to put everything on one page, particularly to talk about the number of contacts we've had, the number of people that we've housed, utilization of shelter beds, the big statistics that give us a bright concept of where we're going. That's accountability for us as a council, for the community to be able to easily, in one page, digest where we've gone, where we've come from where we started. I like to continue to examine these numbers from the date of inception so that we can compare our progress. It is concerning, and I'd like to hear in the second half of your presentation why we've fallen from 84% utilization of our shelter to now 32%. We had 1,825 bed nights over the last half of a year, 180 days. We only utilized 595. That's a 32% utilization rate. So we've had quite a decline in utilization. And I have to agree with Mr. Webster. Clearly, either our outreach has failed or is slipping or is becoming of diminished effect, and I think this is true, and I think we all know this is true, different types of shelter products are needed. I think we all agree that probably moving away from a strictly congregate model would be beneficial. So, maybe we want to look at investing in some other types of shelter products. I have some more thoughts. Let's go to, we have two more council members, and then you have a second half of your presentation, or was that the end of it?
There is a second half.
Okay. Councilmember O'Donnell.
Thank you. PLHA, one of my friends just texted me while we're up here having this discussion and shared with me that Carlsbad actually uses those funds for rapid rehousing. Are you familiar with that?
Not with their specific program, but I am familiar with rapid rehousing.
So what they had suggested is that we actually look into that because then we'd be able to utilize those for families or any individuals, how we set it forth, use those funds to try and provide them with housing, I believe for up to 6 months, as it was stated before. The other thing that was mentioned was PATH, which is People Assisting the Homeless. Are we contract with them, or have we talked with them at all? Because I understand that they actually do a very good job working not just with law enforcement, with other agencies in tracking and maintaining and letting people know exactly who's on the streets, how we can contact them, where they're located. And I just think that might be a good effort for Vista, because when we have multiple agencies that are tracking and we're not coordinating, so we have the number of one versus, this person had this amount of count and another count with a different agency. The coordinating piece, I think, is extremely important. So I don't know if you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, we don't contract with PATH directly, but we are in close contact with them. We communicate actually very regularly. They are a member of our homeless working group. We have entertained the option of potentially formally coordinating together, but that is still a discussion.
And then my other question, I know that we often talk a lot about shelter. How many individuals have we provided with housing in the last 6 to 12 months?
That is information that Exodus is prepared to share later in the presentation. I could
I'll hold
move
off
to
then.
it now if,
Yep,
okay.
nope, I'll hold off. So that's it. I'll have more questions later.
Deputy Mayor Contreras.
Thank you to the public for your comments. I just want to highlight something with mobile showers. I mean, that is something that I brought to this council. We had a discussion, and we have permissible use for temporary and permanent mobile shower facilities, depending on the situation. So, but there is a provider, it's Humanity Showers. Have we had any communication with them?
Yeah, we were just corresponding with him today, actually.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to ask that question because I know originally maybe we weren't as well versed on the fact that religious institutions have the freedom to have showers. So that has, as we were investigating a possible use, permitting the use of mobile showers, that is something that we now understand internally. But I definitely think that it's important for us to have more presence for folks that take care of their personal hygiene. It's incredibly critical. It's a health issue. And with that, have we had any communication with folks? Because at the same time that we had the discussion about mobile showers, we also expanded it to mobile laundry. Have we had any communication? I'm not aware of providers for mobile laundry. It's not my universe, but have we had any communication with any service providers for mobile laundry?
I personally have not directly, but we do plan to solicit some mobile laundry vendors in the area, if there are any, for the safe parking program.
Okay, yeah, definitely. And then also perhaps for the resource fair. And, you know, I think it would be great to see if this is a resource fair, something that we could do at least annually, if not more times than that. And I want to say one last thing. It is terrible that the numbers of folks that are experiencing homelessness and are housing insecure continue, but it's not surprising. Wages are not enough. You know, a lot of the folks that are going to be utilizing our overnight safe parking work. They're very close to not having a shelter at all. A car, they break down. I mean, cars are not reliable. They take a lot of money to keep up and keep them going. So couple that with the fact that we have an aging population and we see the highest increase in homelessness coming from a demographic of which is seniors. And all of this really points to the fact that money doesn't go very far anymore. So whatever we can do to really help folks before they become homeless, that is a huge benefit, not only to the taxpayer who is funding all this, but also to the community to ensure that we continue to provide a high return on investment and more community health and well-being. So it's unfortunate that we continue to see homelessness, an uptick in it year after year, but I would assume that we, even if our efforts were 100%, and everybody that we encountered, we were able to connect to a resource and house permanently, I don't think we would stop seeing folks enter into housing insecurity and enter into homelessness because the economics do not work for the everyday person, let alone for a family where it is very expensive. So when we're talking about our strategic plan to address homelessness, the housing component is critical. So I'm really glad that we're going to have our first permanent supportive housing for seniors here in Vista off North Santa Fe. But we definitely need to be able to utilize some of this funding for housing specific solutions. Because at the end of the day, our social worker can connect a ton of people to resources. Folks can get housing ready, but if they don't have a place to go, they are going to fall back into housing insecurity and into homelessness. And then it becomes even harder for a social worker, whoever that might be in the future, to have a successful conversation with that individual because they have not received they did everything that they were told to do, and they are not receiving the permanent solution to their suffering, which is stability in some kind of housing situation that also provides that community connection that folks need. So, yeah, so I just really want to thank all of the speakers, and hopefully we continue to be able to have these types of conversations because the need will continue even if we were able to stop homelessness as soon as it starts. People are just falling through the cracks because people can't make enough money to survive. And I think the transportation portion of this is critical because folks that don't have their own transportation have to rely on different ways. I want to thank the sheriffs because I actually, they picked me up today while I was walking over here. So shout out to our sheriff's deputies. I was walking from my house and worked up quite a heartbeat trying to make sure I got here in time. But, transportation is so critical. It's very expensive. And I would hope that by collaborating with North County Transit District and perhaps other resources like facilitating access for coordinated transportation, different providers, that we could really figure out how to move people closer to economic prosperity by having some other form of public transportation that can really fill that gap, because most folks just cannot afford private transportation. It's very expensive, so we need to make our public transportation safer, more frequent, more accessible for folks. And I want to ensure that on my advocacy on the North County Transit District side is if we are able to, have some kind of a discounted rate for folks too, where you don't fall into being a youth, you don't fall into being a senior or having a disability, but you have a need for a discounted rate for public transit. I think that could be potentially a component in the future. That's why I think it's critical for us to have these conversations with North County Transit District. Thank you.
And when I've been out in encampments doing outreach or observing outreach, we've offered transit passes. I believe it is NCTD that is making those transit passes available to homeless in our community. Is that correct?
It's through Exodus Recovery, through the Flex funds, yeah.
So I just want to point that out because we, if folks need a transit pass, we do give them a transit pass, and so they don't have to pay to ride the buses or the Sprinter or coaster. I'd like to invite you to proceed with the second half of your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, we'll continue next with governmental and legislative advocacy. As staff continues to monitor federal, state, and local funding opportunities in alignment with the strategic plan. On February 28th, 2023, staff submitted a proposal in response to a notice of funding availability of encampment resolution funding round 2. The proposal includes $4 million to provide a master lease for non-congregate emergency shelter and single room occupancy, or SRO, interim housing units. The two proposed master leased buildings are located along South Santa Fe Avenue and within short walking distance to public transportation. Each building contains 2 levels, with each level holding 6 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a full kitchen, for a total of 12 SROs per building. Each building's bedrooms will be furnished with a bed, nightstand, and locking storage. Additional beds will also be kept in storage for use when accommodating couples in the same unit, and both buildings will accommodate pets. One building is proposed to be utilized as an emergency non-congregate shelter. The units will be available for single occupancy and provide shelter for individuals with trauma that inhibits their willingness or ability to accept a bed at a congregate shelter. The ability to expand each room to accommodate a partner alleviates the refusal of a shelter when couples are not able to shelter together. The second building will be utilized as interim housing for clients whose cases have developed to include a housing stability plan. Clients enrolled in this interim housing will have the ability to stay up to 24 months as they continue to develop a housing stability plan and household budget that will include, but is not limited to, rental payments, items needed in the household to maintain safe and sanitary conditions, and essential household items. Once a plan is in place, housing navigators will assist in identifying and securing permanent housing opportunities. The proposed program will center an individual's choice by prioritizing their autonomy and agency in decision-making regarding their own care and support. This will be achieved through a person-centered approach that recognizes the unique needs, values, and preferences of each individual.
Mr. Lung, what does ERF stand for?
Encampment Resolution Funding.
Oh, okay. And I see, this looks like it's in the county, yes?
It is.
Okay, and these are being funded by Encampment Resolution, which is state funds that are being expended through the county?
No, through the city. They would be. This is proposed for the second round of encampment resolution funding, which has not been notified for award yet.
Okay, so just so I understand, you're proposing applying for ERF funding from the state, and this is the proposal that you're making, what you would do with that money?
Correct, and the proposal has been submitted.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. The provision of non-congregate shelter and accommodation of pets will be paramount in the ability and willingness for encampment residents to accept shelter who have previously refused current congregate shelter opportunities. Existing emergency shelter beds are provided by the city's agreement with the Alliance for Regional Solutions for the prioritization of shelter beds in their shelter network, which includes Haven House in Escondido and La Posada in Carlsbad. Between October 1st, 2022 and March 31st, 2023, 23 unduplicated Vista residents stayed for a total of 595 shelter nights. 5 of those residents have found permanent housing, and 1 resident has transitioned into bridge housing. In addition to the shelter beds provided in the Alliance for Regional Solutions shelter network, the upcoming Vista Safe Parking program will also provide unsheltered Vista neighbors living in their cars to park safely at night in the Eucalyptus parking lot here at Vista Civic Center. The program will host up to 25 vehicles 7 days a week from 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. and provide supportive services to clients with a focus on housing and income stability to achieve permanent housing. The program will provide on-site restrooms and hand washing stations and overnight security. The lot and program are currently in the implementation stages and is expected to be open to enrolled clients later this summer. Finally, I'd like to invite Elizabeth Galorio, Program Director of Vista Programs with Exodus Recovery, to present an overview, analysis, and accomplishments of the social work outreach and housing navigation strategy of the strategic plan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good evening, Mayor Franklin and council members.
Pardon me, just a moment if you would. Did anybody have any questions about the last portion? Okay, I'll come right back to you. Did you want to? Okay, I apologize.
Go ahead, first slide. The City of Vista Homeless Outreach Team has been fully operational since October 2020 and has expanded with the Encampment Resolution Funding Grant, which was awarded in May of 2022. Today, the HOT program is able to provide 1 program director, 3 care managers, 2 housing navigators, 2 community health workers, 1 program support staff to support the city's strategic plan to address homelessness. During this reporting period, we added some staff trainings. All staff have completed or are in the process of completing training to have access to the Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS. I'd like to point out that the benefit of this training is the ability for all staff to have access and document in the system, as opposed to the limitations of when the housing navigators were the only ones that were documenting in the HMIS. Furthermore, housing navigators have attended the shared housing training as well. Additionally, the community health worker has completed SSI/SSDI outreach, access, and recovery training to assist clients with the SSI/SSDI application process. This is really beneficial for our clients, for us to be able to offer assistance in the event that legal aid is a capacity, so we're kind of the backup. Next slide, please. The most significant strength and asset to client success has been having access to funding to bridge housing through the hotel motel voucher program. You'll see that during this reporting period, we served 14 clients within 10 households, and there were 284 nights utilized, and out of the 10 households served, 9 were able to successfully exit to housing. The only discrepancy in that number is that 1 was still in the program after this reporting period. The homeless outreach team has helped 15 households, a total of 21 adults and 14 minor children, obtain or maintain stable housing. Increased program funding has supported the addition of both staff and rental assistance capabilities, which have helped increase housing placements. I'd like to point out that we are currently adding new functions to the database to be able to capture and report on rental assistance or housing payments, and having the ability to categorize them accordingly. We have, through the CES match, we have matched 11 unique clients to emergency housing voucher, 4 unique clients to rapid rehousing, and 6 unique clients were given rental assistance. Rental assistance to prevent homelessness, we were able to give that to 3 clients. I want to say that we started offering this in May of 2022. We were able to unify 5 individuals with their families, and there were 29 clients who were either placed in permanent housing or rehoused. I'd like to also note that we did not hire our first housing navigator until January of 2022, and the team has been working with a housing specialist to preserve vouchers as well as facilitate mediation and meetings with landlords to prevent eviction. Common barriers to housing are, and this is in no particular order, poor credit or no credit, history of evictions, criminal background, income requirements, lack of income, and affordable housing, lack of studio and 1-bedroom housing inventory. Next slide. The homeless outreach team has witnessed a rise in referrals for families with minor children and single women with children who were or are literally homeless or at imminent risk of homelessness. As a result, the Exodus Recovery Database was updated to collect information on households with minor children. This is a new data point that we recently started tracking. We are currently serving families in 13 households with 15 adults and 44 children. The average number of children per household is about 3 or 4, and we have 1 family with 6 children. Next slide. I believe this is probably where that confusion was about earlier. So the data we're capturing here is these are unique clients that were enrolled in that particular reporting year. And the notation at the bottom is our unduplicated clients that may have still been added or engaged in the next reporting period.
Explain that again, because Mr. Long said it was cumulative, and I see by adding the numbers together that it's not cumulative because the number went down. So explain that again, what the unique clients number, exactly how do you derive that number?
So in year one, there were 197 new clients. And in year two, there were 207, and partial of year three is 128. At the bottom is there were 358 clients, and those are just clients that were added or still engaged from year one to year two.
I believe the confusion might be that the numbers displayed in the middle row, that's for unduplicated clients.
Unduplicated.
And beneath it is the unique clients.
So when somebody is disengaged from outreach, they come out, because I thought you told me it was a cumulative number, which would mean the number would always get larger.
The cumulative number would be the addition of these three across the 3 reporting periods. The discrepancy with the unique clients is that they would consider previously unduplicated clients as unique clients again in the second reporting period. So total since inception, I believe the number is
532.
532. So these are the number of new unduplicated clients per reporting period.
I get the unduplicated. Am I the only one not understanding? Am I the only one that's confused? It doesn't make any sense. So start completely over again. All 5 of us don't get it.
Okay.
So I'm going to explain it, and you tell me where I'm wrong, because we need to go in a backwards fashion here. So unduplicated is no person listed twice. We'll start with that, right?
Yep.
And as they're listed as unduplicated in program year 1, those are the individuals that you first encountered in program year 1.
Correct.
Or actually any individuals you encountered in program year 1. Because as we moved to program year 2, we had 207 that were first encountered in program year 2.
Correct.
Okay. And that gets us to 358, although those two numbers added together are more like 400 and change. No? Where am I going wrong?
So the 358 unique clients below is not the summation of the unduplicated clients for the first 2 reporting periods. With the unique client, 358 unique clients in period 2 includes the 207 unduplicated clients, as well as the clients from year 1 that are still engaged by Exodus. And the remaining, that difference would be clients that have no longer engaged in the program.
I see. Okay, so it's the definition of people that we're actively working with. So at the point in which we didn't observe them that year, didn't have contact with them that year. So it's the total number of unduplicated people that we had contact with during the entire program year. The unduplicated is first-time contact in
Correct.
that program year.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe we can clean up the labeling on that, because I think really it's first time would be the important label on that upper number. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Thank you. Next slide.
By the way, while we're here at that slide, what do you attribute, we're having great year-over-year growth in contacts. Would you attribute that primarily to growth in our outreach staff?
Yes, definitely. So there is no notable trends in age range compared to data since inception.
What does O&E stand for?
I'm sorry?
O&D, we see it repeatedly. What's?
O&E stands for outreach and engagement.
Okay.
Next slide. The data shows a 5% increase in female clients and a 4% decrease in male clients since inception. Most families we served were single females. Next slide. This is the data on race with our outreach and engagement clients and our enrolled clients. The data during reporting period shows 10% decrease in white groups, 4% increase in other multiracial groups, and 4% increase in unknown compared to data since its inception. Data during this reporting period shows a 4% increase in Hispanic or Latino and 4% decrease in non-Hispanic or non-Latino compared to data since inception. There is no notable trends in veteran status compared to data since inception.
If we could go back to that. The last time that I had asked, near the end of last year, we had 11 individuals who reported being veterans. Do we know if that number has changed?
I'm going to have to defer to my colleague for historical data, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine. That's something I think we're all particularly interested in. If we could call out the exact number of homeless veterans that we're contacting, I think the entire council would like to know that number from time to time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide. As far as substance use disorder, the data during this reporting period shows a 7% decrease in positive report of substance use disorder and a 7% increase in negative report of substance use disorder compared to data since inception.
And how many people declined to answer that question versus answered yes or no? If we don't know, could we report that next time?
Well, we have the O&E clients saying yes, there were 9, and enrolled clients reported 66. And for no,
I see the math.
Yeah.
The subtraction, and I got it.
Again, regarding mental health, the data during reporting period shows a 4% decrease in self-report of mental health compared to data since inception. Next slide. Homelessness has many contributing factors, but I will highlight 2 of the most common, and that is housing and income or the lack thereof. Next slide. During the 6 months reporting period, we have made 53 total referrals to O&E clients. At the core of what we do, we build rapport with our clients, even in outreach and engagement, by connecting them to needed resources. There was a 53% successful linkage, and the most common referral was for personal identification, such as driver's license and birth certificate.
If you could go backwards. So let's specifically, I just want to call out housing, navigation, and referral to shelter. Can you call those numbers out for us? I see housing navigation services. I see a total count of, I believe,
4.
Was it 4 or 5?
Total count 5.
Okay, and then,
There's 4 pending and 5 total count.
and how about referral to shelter? How many did we help enter into emergency shelter? Is that in front of us? Oh, thank you. A lot of data here. Okay, 10, 6 to La Posada and 4 to Haven House. Thank you.
For our enrolled clients, we made a total of 226 referrals, and we had a slightly higher success rate of 59%. And the most common referral was for benefits assistance, which are CalFresh, SSI, SSDI, General Relief, CalWorks, and Medi-Cal. For shelter utilization, data includes all clients regardless of phase, whether they're in O&E or enrolled. Clients attempting to access shelter services within 6 months of discharge date from previous stay at that shelter are deemed ineligible. And what that means is that there is a 6-month wait between stays. So if they want to go back, they can't if it hasn't been 6 months.
While we're on this slide, so we went from 113 decline to 8 decline. Could you illuminate why we had such my understanding is that in every contact, we're attempting to offer shelter. I would hope that'd be the last question, even if it's just perfunctory. What would you attribute the fall off? We're offering as many times, but how many times did we offer and how many times was declined? We had this 17,000 or 1,780 contacts, so presumably we offered it that many times.
I would assume. I don't want to misrepresent the data,
Right.
but I can collect that for you and get back to you on that. I will say that during community cleanup, we have to offer shelters. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, clients can decline shelter, and these are the reasons for declining shelter, and this is ranked in no particular order. Unfavorable past experiences in shelters, separation from household members, separation from pets, proximity to service providers and support systems, and access to transportation. Challenges and recommendations. So storage needs. Clients are refused services such as shelter, housing, and referrals that would require them to abandon their belongings due to fear of items being lost or stolen. Local storage facilities have been unwilling to sign W-9s in order for Exodus Recovery to render third-party payments. The most commonly reported reason is a lack of company policy. Additional reasons may include previous negative experiences serving the homeless population. However, this is purely speculation. Our recommendation: Exodus Recovery proposes creating a storage program utilizing ERF funding to bridge this gap in services. Similar programs have been created in the downtown San Diego area and have helped unsheltered individuals attend appointments, gain employment, work on housing options, and meet with service providers. For family needs, the challenge is the lack of shelter bed capacities for families with more than 5 members. So lack of income in affordable housing and increasing cost of available housing. Recommendations is to fund current shelters to expand bed capacity and increase affordable housing inventory.
How many families of more than 5 do we observe that were in need of shelter?
How many?
Was it a significant number?
We seem to have a rise of families with children, and that seems to be the case.
I'd like to know, since you pointed it out as one of your primary challenges, if in a future update, if you could get that
Absolutely.
number to us.
Safe parking needs. Size of vehicles is a new piece of data that we will be collecting moving forward to gauge need for safe parking program that accommodates RVs and oversized vehicles. The challenge is the lack of safe parking areas in North County, specifically for RVs and oversized vehicles. Financial barriers associated with maintenance and safe parking of personal vehicles. And our recommendations is to develop safe parking program that can accommodate RVs and oversized vehicles in North San Diego County, and designate the safe parking areas within city limits pending safe parking program. And before I conclude this presentation, I'd like to present a former client of ours to share about her journey and story. Jennifer.
Hi,
Hi there.
I am a recovering homelessness person, and it was a surprise to me to get in that position. My husband and I are both very college educated. I held licenses in insurance and real estate in 2 states, my SEC license, a teaching degree with English and history, K through 12. Excuse me. I taught school in Mexico for a year, and on my way back home here, stopped off in Las Vegas and worked at Flamingo flipping cards to a little larger group of students who also didn't listen very well. But we made it back here. My father was in trouble a little bit. My mother passed away in 2009. My dad didn't know what she did, how she did with the money, with the house, whatever, called for help in 2011. I went down there with my husband, and there we go. Went through, helped him until about 16 when he passed. 2016, that is. He passed, and other family members relieved us of our position and our possessions. Kind of left us with a car, $10 in gas. There's a shelter down the road. See ya. And that was it. So we lived in the car for a while, like 4 or 5 years. And that was scary enough. I've never been in that position. My husband had started having seizures, so he could not work. I had not worked in a while. My Social Security just began, so luckily we did have a little bit of money to survive with. And we did. But to try and find these services was so hard. I called everybody every day to ask for more referrals. Went to churches, went to private people, went to everywhere. It took me until 2021 when I finally got the referral to Exodus, met with her. She gave us some hope and says, you know what, I think we can do this. And we got to, don't get excited, it's not going to work. And at the same time, our car decided to pass on and go to the great beyond. And both our phones were stolen. And our small storage that we had with a cooler, a Bunsen burner, sleeping bags was broken into, and that stuff was stolen. I figured, how low can you get? I am not a druggie. Neither one of us were druggies. Neither one of us had a mental illness. At least when we began, we did not. We felt like it was coming on. And we did, and I got a hold of Exodus Recovery. She met with us at 6 o'clock in the morning because she had a very full schedule. Spoke to us, gave us that much hope, as I said, and she said, I'll meet you in a week. Get this paper, birth certificate, yada, yada, yada. We did that with the help of Brother Benos, who was also wonderful people. And she said, yeah, we can do something here. And I said, okay. And in February, that was in October of 21. In February of 21, I was in a hotel. I met Miss Candine Thomas. She was going to be our worker, as I call her, my best friend at that point. Led us through, and we did everything we had to do. It went smooth. All of a sudden, we're in a hotel waiting for an apartment. I did my due diligence, and we called every apartment around and found out everything we needed to find out. And sure enough, in April of 2021, we moved into an apartment complex here in Vista, my first choice, and it's wonderful. It was fabulous. We moved in with 2 sleeping bags and a TV because my husband knew we wouldn't have much to do for a few days. So we had that. And we looked at each other and just said, is this real? And it lasted. We're still here. The next few days, in came a new bed, a sofa, dining table, dishes, towels, silverware, glasses. To sit on a chair was an amazing experience after not being able to. Being in the car was hard, but yet we were covered. As soon as we had to go under the bush, literally, the rain was scary. It was cold. We didn't know the people around us. And we had seen many different kinds of people in Benno's and other places like Benno's. So to see these programs tonight is heartwarming. I'm glad to see that somebody is working. Shelter for couples. My husband was having seizures. We couldn't be separated. The laundry. One Catholic church, well, mission at Los Del Stanley, you know, the mission up there. The school back there, they do some laundry once a month, I think. It was wonderful. But to have a shower, a real shower in your own plate. It's been a year now. We signed our next year's lease, and we still will wake up and say, where are we? Do we have to leave? No, we're home. And that word home means a really lot when you've been out on the road. So I just want to thank Exodus Recovery and all you other people that are doing all these programs that I wish I knew then that they had them, to help these people that are out there that really are struggling from no cause of their own. They're not mentally ill. They're not doing drugs. Things just happen. They were handed the lemons, and they just need to help find those people to help make that lemonade. So thank you for giving me the time to speak, and it's nice to see all of you. And this is actually my first time back out in society after a year. So it's slow, but it's coming. And that would be my only suggestion to all of the programs here, is don't just put these people in there and say, good luck, and turn around and be gone, which Candine has not been able to do because I call her all the time. Give them some time. Call them once a month. Go visit them once a month. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half hour, whatever you can spare. But it's worth it for those people to know that it is a slow step. Like I said, I've done a lot of public work, and for me to be a year, not counting the others, of not being out there, scary. But you guys have very friendly faces, and I thank you for letting me speak, and that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for having the courage to share your story with us. Mr. Lung, is that the end of the presentation?
That is the conclusion of the presentation. I'm available for questions.
Councilmember Melendez.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing your story. And thank you to Exodus and to all the service providers for providing those linkages and ongoing services to improve your situation. I wanted to take a step back and look at the encampment resolution grant funding, part 2, that we're going to be applying for, that we have applied for. This, to me, is really progress that I wanted to see. Well, let me take a step back even further. In the agenda, there is a list of prior council actions, and unfortunately, something is not included on there that I believe should be, and that is our previous council actions regarding our request for proposals for our own shelter here in Vista. I know that we were not successful in that process. We did not receive any requests for proposals, but I think it's important for part of the record for us to acknowledge that our council did attempt to initiate a process to develop some sort of shelter here in Vista previously. And at the time, we didn't get any requests for proposals, but later staff was able to come back to us and make recommendations for permanent supportive housing, which we have, I believe, an active request for proposals out. Is that correct?
It's been published and closed.
Okay, wonderful. So we should be seeing progress on that at some point. So I just wanted to kind of reflect back, when we did have that conversation about shelters in the city of Vista, I had made it really clear to my colleagues here and to the public that we need innovative shelter models that really meet people where they're at and address someone in their humanity and give value to their autonomy. And I tried to illustrate what that would look like with individual rooms, with spaces that were enclosed for someone to have privacy and dignity and have their own space to be able to recover from the traumatic experience of being homeless. And to see that we are now pursuing such a concept is really incredible to me. I'm very grateful for being heard. And I also am grateful that the state of California is outlining funding resources that do just that. Funding resources that prioritize autonomy and dignity and recognize that not every congregate shelter model is going to work for every person or every family, right? Now we have the opportunity to hopefully, if we do get this grant funding, provide shelter for couples who would normally be separated, provide shelter for people with pets, really fill in that gap. And I also see this as something that's very lacking in our region, which is that type of bridge housing, the type of, transitional housing between emergency shelter and permanent housing, right? The stepping stones to get folks into a better situation. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the results of this grant funding. I would just like to clarify, I don't believe it's single occupant if we have, is it still considered single occupant if 2 people are allowed in the unit?
The SRO reference is really just a way to demonstrate how the bedrooms are laid out, and you can have separate tenants in each room, which may include a household that includes a couple.
Okay.
And still have shared kitchen and restroom facilities.
Okay, so shared kitchen and restroom facilities, but individual units for up to 2 people, or will there be more permitted?
We've only considered the possibility of 2. We might consider a possibility for more, but we'll consider that if that does present itself to us.
Okay. And I also think it's great that people need a plan in order to enter the shelter program, in order to continue to the transitional housing program adjacent to the shelter. And I think it is going to be very helpful in filling that gap. But could you clarify for us who is eligible to be referred to one of the 24 units that are being provided by this resource?
Yeah, so these units would be reserved for clients that are engaged by excess recovery in the proposed ERF2 area, which is in and around the Sycamore area. And the eligibility guidelines are still to be finalized. Those will be considered if we are noticed of award, which we'll work with Exodus on together to develop that final guideline. And it is open to any direction or feedback now from council.
Okay, so this is very specific. The recommendation is very specific, only in areas of the Sycamore community there, not in the other BPO areas such as Hacienda.
Unfortunately, not.
Okay, so we could only apply for grant funding for the Sycamore area.
Correct.
Okay. So it's not for the general public, right? It's only for those who are part of encampments in the Sycamore area. But we see a lot of refusals to shelter that are based on conflict and discontent around congregate shelter settings. So I think that this is absolutely appropriate and kind of where we need to go. And it seems like with the description of the funding source and the requirements for the grant, it's where the state is going as well. So if we're innovative and put forward an innovative plan, we may be competitive for this grant funding, but we will see. Okay, I had a question about the rapid rehousing. I think we're kind of going into the presentation from Exodus. I have a few questions if the representative would like to come back to the podium. Could you remind me of your name again?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, okay. So the rapid rehousing that is offered, there's a lot of information here. So, I mean, I'm sure we could talk about this all night, but just a few questions. Okay. Rental assistance. Is that funded through PLHA currently?
Parts of it, yes. The other part would be ERF 1.
Okay. So if the outreach is conducted in the BPO area of Hacienda, then funds could be used from that. And if it is just kind of general
Remaining
outreach,
areas, PLHA.
PLHA.
Mhm.
Okay. And how long is that rental assistance?
It's typically for 6 months.
Okay. So that's kind of the more long-term or mid to long-term that you were describing of the different types of rental assistance. So would a short-term rental assistance program look more like 2.4 months like you were describing in the previous program that we've had?
Yes.
Okay. So we do have some rental assistance paid for through PLHA and Encampment Resolution 1 funds that are program specific and mid to long term. Okay. I have a question about the roles of our service providers. So we have 3 case managers with Exodus, and I understand that those are folks that provide links to basic services.
That's correct. They also conduct outreach.
Okay. And then there's 2 housing navigators. Are they also conducting outreach?
They do.
Okay. And they are utilizing HMIS, conducting the VI SPDAT.
That's correct.
And providing links to housing.
That's correct.
And
all the staff.
And probably collaborating with the case manager to make sure, you know, you have all your ducks in a row for your housing opportunity.
That's correct.
Okay. And then the community health worker, that is a newer role, right? What are their primary duties?
They are support staff to the case managers and the housing navigators, and to myself too. They do tasks to support the case managers. For instance, if a case manager needs a food box for a client, that's typically a community health worker task. They also will do collateral contacts, transport clients. They also participate in outreach as well.
Okay. My other questions were regarding mental health. So mental health is self-reported, but do you have any processes in place to screen for mental health? Are any of the service providers trained to do screenings for mental health, or is it all self-reported from the participants?
That is all self-reported from the participants. Our team does not have the ability to diagnose.
Okay, but they can conduct referrals to refer someone to a licensed clinical social worker to do a diagnosis.
That's correct.
Okay. One of the speakers who I believe left had a good question, and then I wanted to see if you had any thoughts on, and that was, how many referrals are the same individual but with different services? So maybe you can, I don't know if you have specific numbers on that, but in general, if you're providing a referral, whether that's someone who you're doing outreach and engagement, or if they are a participant. First, could you clarify for us, what is the difference between someone who's like outreached and engaged versus how does someone become a participant of the program?
Outreach and engagement period is typically 30 days, approximately 30 days. And these are clients that we encounter in the community. Participants or enrolled, I imagine that is what you
that's what I meant.
These are the ones that have consented to being enrolled in the program.
Okay, and what are the primary differences between being enrolled and just receiving engagement and outreach?
I want to refer back to something that was discussed earlier. Sometimes in outreach, particularly with law enforcement, individuals will engage with us and they're not really willing to participate in the program. So the main difference, for instance, one thing that really comes to mind for me is our enrolled clients are automatically enrolled into HMIS. We do not do that with our outreach and engaged clients because they have to be linked to a program in order to be enrolled in HMIS.
Okay, so that's the regional piece of the puzzle, right? That is part of how we collect the data and differentiate between somebody who is receiving referrals during outreach, right? That can be someone who's not enrolled, and then someone who is enrolled consents to being as part of the program. They might have to sign a consent form, right? There's a process that they have to go through. Are there any differences in the type of referrals someone can obtain if they're enrolled versus just receiving outreach services?
When an individual is enrolled, we do a thorough assessment of their needs, different areas of needs, and we can then identify what resources and services to link them to, as well as, I'm sorry. That's basically the big distinction.
You have
is
more
that
of like
being
a
able
case plan
to
for them, it sounds like. Okay.
Exactly, that escaped me, is being able to develop a case plan
Sure.
and goals.
One of the
correct.
things I noticed in the data was that people who are enrolled, and maybe this is just because I don't know why this would be, but it looked like, and I would have to flip back through all the information to find it, people who are enrolled seem to have less referrals to shelter than people who are just outreach and engaged. Do you know perhaps why that is?
I don't want to misrepresent the data.
Sure.
This is outside of my purview. This data is prior to my being the director, so I'd like to defer to my colleague, if you don't mind.
Yeah, if anyone present is able to kind of respond to the difference in referrals to shelter when someone's enrolled versus just outreach, then I'd love to understand that. Because I think all of us have a goal of getting more people to accept referrals to shelter if we've contracted those shelters. And I don't know why they would have less referrals if they were enrolled.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Noelani DeZone Othout. I am currently the clinical manager with Exodus Recovery, and I was one of the previous program directors for this program. During my tutelage, what we noticed most with shelter utilizations and maintaining homeless status, when we are trying to connect individuals to things like permanent housing with an emergency housing voucher, individuals need to remain in a type of shelter or unhoused in order to maintain that status and be able to qualify for those permanent housing positions. Once they move into specific types of housing, they lose that status and they no longer qualify for those vouchers. With shelter utilization, we also, in the last year, most significantly heard clients reporting previous bad experiences, and they did not want us to continue conversations about shelter beds.
Okay, so maybe for folks that haven't been enrolled yet, they're a little bit more open to those services. And then folks that are enrolled, they might be receiving other services as an alternative to shelter
Yes.
and may have already been referred to shelter and have had a bad experience. I'm
Yes.
curious about what you're saying about losing eligibility for permanent housing resources. I'm someone who absolutely believes that we need more affordable housing, so I appreciate you reflecting on that in the report and providing that as a recommendation. Would you be able to explain to us how that works, right? How does someone lose eligibility for those really important resources?
So specifically, what we have been able to house clients with the most is the emergency housing voucher. That emergency housing voucher, the qualifications are that the individual has to be at risk of homelessness, which means that they will lose their housing within 14 days, and that is HUD language, or they have to be literally homeless. When they move into things like transitional housing, independent living facilities, single-room occupancies, they are considered housed. Even couch surfing with a family and friend, they lose their homeless status. And so they no longer qualify for that voucher, which is instrumental and when we consider the low fixed income that most of these clients are living off of.
Okay, so we saw a list here of reasons for declining shelter. And I think one of the reasons that was talked about but not listed was storage. Would you say that another reason for declining shelter would be lack of eligibility for permanent housing options?
For the shelter or the storage piece?
No, I'm sorry. So if somebody takes a shelter option like going to La Posada in Carlsbad or going to Interfaith in Escondido, do they lose their eligibility for the voucher that you're describing?
I don't believe so, but I have not worked as closely with the shelters over the last 6 months since stepping down from my position.
It's okay if you don't have an answer to that. I think that's definitely a curiosity for me, and I imagine other people would have the same curiosity that I would hate to see people denying shelter on the basis of losing more permanent housing options if they go to the shelter. I really, really hope that that's not the case. Sounds like it might not be.
Yeah.
Sounds like if they use, if they are able to room with a friend or if they have some sort of transitional housing option, then they might lose that voucher. But it's definitely something to keep in mind when we think about how do we ensure that people do take the resources that we're offering them here at the city.
I believe for HUD, with their definitions, that shelters in transitional housing projects, and they have to be categorized as a transitional housing project, they do not lose that status.
Okay, so they are still considered homeless and still eligible for that permanent housing option. Okay, that's a relief. Thank you so much. It's very illuminating. Thank you for clarifying that nuance. I also, and you can go ahead and take a seat. I don't have any more questions for Exodus, but I just want to stress that ongoing supportive services seem to be something that make a real big difference. That is why I'm such a huge proponent of permanent supportive housing, because it is the ultimate kind of end game. It is the solution to resolving someone's homelessness. Not only do they have a roof over their head, but they have that network of continued services. So I'm going to continue to promote that and make sure that we have the funds available at the city to produce those homes for people to truly resolve their homeless status. And with that, thank you so much information. My head's still spinning it all together. I might have other questions after everybody else speaks, but I won't take any more time. Thank you so much.
Deputy Mayor Contreras.
Thank you to Exodus for the presentation and for all the work in our community to make our community stronger and connect folks that are experiencing homelessness to resources. And ultimately, the goal is to connect folks to shelter. Thank you, Jessica, for being brave and letting us know your story. I think it's so critical for folks such as yourself to let us know directly what your experience has been. That's why I think I really appreciate that Councilmember O'Donnell brought forward, again, this idea of a commission, because, folks with lived experience can really provide a lot of insight to what works and what doesn't work and what can work. So I really appreciate that. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up a point that I've brought up before, and this goes back to even our internal homeless working group. I didn't see Vista Unified School District's not on there, right? As one of our partners.
In the working group?
Right.
Correct.
Okay, so they're not there. The reason that I bring that up, and the reason I've brought it up before, is that our data is looking at folks that are 18 years and older. However, there is a significant issue with youth housing insecurity and homelessness, and currently VUSD has identified 566 students that qualify as McKinney-Vento, meaning that they're housing insecure, and for all intents and purposes, the school district identifies them as being homeless. And it's astonishing because the breakdown, and this looks like this is data, very recent data as of 3/30, so March 30th, 2023, 267 of those 566 students are elementary students. 149 are middle school students, and 150 are high school students. I think we need to do more. When we talk about having a strategic plan to address homelessness, it can't just be, put a little asterisk on there and it's like 18 years and older. We need to address homelessness and housing insecurity in the entirety of our community for everybody, including youth. We just know with so much different studies and we know that folks that are young and having this type of experience, it is not healthy for them, and it really does not set them up for success. So I don't know what it needs to look like, but we need to be having conversations with Vista Unified School District to address the serious amount of housing insecurity with our students. And I would imagine if I were to break down this information, we could even look at some of if we're looking at elementary, there's probably some of the schools that have higher concentrations of elementary students that are housing insecure. We want to make sure that we are setting up our youth for a lot more success than what these numbers are showing us. And I understand that Vista Unified School District spans beyond the boundaries of Vista proper, but I would really like to see, because I've asked for this before and we haven't done it yet. So I think it's critical that we have this dialogue with Vista Unified School District, because I was able to contact just by chance our Vista Firefighters Association. They were doing Christmas presents, and I was able to get in contact with the social worker at Vista Unified School District, who's no longer there. She was incredible, and was able to come in contact with the family, a very large family of a single mother with students in various ages, in different stages of being, a student, whether it was elementary, middle school, or high school. They had students in every single one of those categories. And they had never been spoken to by the city. And by the time that I was able to come in contact with them, they were already severely behind in rent. And so, hearing earlier that someone who's in the arrears, there's not funding available to help them. If we could have reached them sooner, they could have had perhaps a lot less stress in their life, at minimum, a lot less stress. So I want to ensure that we are being as proactive as possible, because the goal, the best thing that we can do is prevent homelessness before it starts. So whether that's rental assistance or whether it is connecting to folks that have already been identified by Vista Unified School District as housing insecure and homeless, that we do something about that. I just find it completely unacceptable that we're not having that type of conversation. Outside of that, when we're looking at the encampment resolution funding 2 proposal, I also wasn't aware of the fact that you have to have a 6-month delay between shelter stays. That to me is a little bit upsetting. I could see possibly why there would be a stipulation like that, but someone who needs help needs help. So if we have this type of shelter here, do we need to abide by the same rules, or would we be able to eliminate, if possible, this issue of needing to have 6 months between your stays? Or is there a really good reason why that's there?
I don't know what the source of that requirement is, whether it's specific to the local shelters or a larger uniform rule, but we can check on that. If we are not required to do so, we can certainly, of course, ensure that we are able to take folks back into the program within a 6-month span.
Yeah, I think if we have, and I would love to hear from my counsel as well about that, but I, for one, would hate to deny someone shelter who wants shelter and they are not eligible for shelter because they were at the shelter already. And I think this harkens also back to something that Councilmember Melendez stated, that at the end of the day, what folks need is housing, and we do not have enough affordable housing. So, more permanent supportive housing is critical. Us being able as a city to have funding so that if we can package together a developer who can do permanent supportive housing, that can go after those tax credits, then we can have the funds available for the critical tiebreaker, just like we did to make the North Santa Fe permanent supportive housing for seniors a highly competitive project. So I think that's really, really important. And I think that is all that I have to say at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have quick questions for my Exodus peeps over there. And I think the first one, the mayor already asked for me, which was just how many or what percentage of clients that you're serving are over 5 people. The fact that your summary that you noted it as one of your 3 big challenges, I'm wondering what is the percentage? So if you're, meeting with 26 families or 26 unique individuals, what percentage of those individuals have more than 5 family members? How many of those have you had to turn away? Obviously, if it's one of your challenges, do you kind of know exactly what that percentage is, or?
So of the households that we served with minor children, we had 5 who had more than 5 members and were not eligible for shelters.
Okay, and that was out of how many?
I believe the number was 13 or 15.
Oh, wow, okay. So it was a very, very high percentage of families. Okay, and then the only other question that I had for you, which I guess probably runs in conjunction with this, is you're asking for, you're recommending that we fund current shelters to expand more bed capacity, yet it looked like when I looked at your shelter numbers, of the E&O client referrals, 10 that were offered, they denied, so that was 0% of them went. And then out of the 23, only 11 accepted shelter beds. So I'm wondering if that's...
Unfortunately, I don't
You're not the
quite
shelter
know
bed?
how to explain the data, but what I can share is that the families that we did work with, those 5 families who had more than 5 members and were not eligible for shelter, would have willfully taken it if it had been available to them, but they were ineligible based on their house size.
So are you thinking that, because I think the mayor brought it up earlier, that we're using less of our shelter bed nights than we've already purchased? I mean, it's a real thing, is we have a lot of shelter beds available that people aren't using. Would you say if we allocated some of that funding to rooms that accommodated more than 5 people, we would have a higher turnout in our shelter beds? Because I mean, we're basically we leave money on the table when we're not using those per se. So I'm wondering if that was shifted, do you think we'd have a higher turnout?
So the shelters that we are a part of with the Alliance, they are not part of the family shelters.
Gotcha.
So we don't have the priority with them. I think that because we have seen such a stark increase in families that are experiencing homelessness, and Regional Task Force on Homelessness has also recorded very similar data that there is a very big need for family shelters.
Okay, so it's not so much just your regular shelter bed, it's the family shelter bed. And thank you so much for that, by the way, greatly appreciate it. And Mr. Lung, a question for you is, do we have the ability to shop for shelter beds that can accommodate families? I know we have an RFP out for shelter, you got the EF whatever that you just showed us over there, but if we're not using all of the resources that we're trying to use, is there a way to find, or is there a shelter that only serves families that takes them with low barrier per se?
I'm not aware of any shelters currently operating that would take a family of that size. The majority of family shelters would not be a low barrier shelter due to safety concerns. But that is something staff is eager to find that resource for.
And would it be, I don't know, smart of us, I guess, to shift the funding into like more hotel vouchers per se? I mean, if you could put a family like that into a hotel voucher temporarily, or a short-term rental or something like that. I mean, whatever we're not using from the beds we're not using, I'm just kind of wondering how we can, best leverage that funding for our population. Because if, we got 18 people coming and we can only help 13 out of 18, those aren't good numbers, So, anything we could do, I think the council would agree too. I got a wife and 4 kids. I couldn't imagine not having anywhere and then actually having the courage to go ask for help and them say, yeah, you need too much help. Have a good day. So that's a really rough situation to be in. That's all I got for you guys. I really appreciate the update. I'm looking forward to the next update. And I think all the changes that we're going to make as a council are going to be very effective for the city. Thank you so much.
Councilmember O'Donnell.
Thank you. Just on the 6-month delay, my understanding is that it is not universal across the board, but I would like to look into that as well, because I do think that that is a huge issue. The other question I have, I know we talked a little bit about safe parking. Is there going to, I know that we're not running it directly, right? So it's going to be through JFS, but is there a program in place to ensure that we can help track these individuals to see if they end up in permanent housing or the program or services they're receiving beyond parking?
Yeah, so all these clients would be entered into HMIS where we could track that information.
Okay. Because I think that is extremely important. My wife runs student housing at Cal State, and I cannot tell you the amount of individuals that are sleeping in their vehicles that are students that go to that university. And these are members of our own communities, specifically Vista and other parts. So I think that'd be really good information to have. I want to kind of backstep on some information that was not presented in this presentation, but during the COVID relief rental assistance program, we changed the stipulations that were not in line with what the county was doing. We actually made it a little more challenging to receive that rental assistance. Is there a reason we did that, and was that a contributing factor at all to the rise in homelessness, or could it have been a contributing factor to the rise in homelessness that we've seen in Vista?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the particular guidelines of those 2 programs that preceded my oversight of the programs a bit, but I can tell you that the CDBG CV Rental Assistance Program was a federally funded program, so more than likely it's the federal regulations that were more restrictive than what the county was able to offer.
Okay. Yeah, because somebody had mentioned that, like the city of Vista, so we implemented that people had to upload bank statements or have access to them, whereas the county didn't put that overlay on access to funding. And so just making it more difficult, I think, is actually counterintuitive to what we're trying to accomplish through our programs. Just to backtrack a bit, for rapid rehousing, I really think that we should explore what Carlsbad is doing with the PLHA. I'd like to see if we can work with PATH, or if that'd be something the council would be open to contracting with or talking about at a later date. what we can do to better coordinate with other agencies to get accurate counts, so that way we're not duplicating information. And beyond that, Jennifer, I just want to thank you for sharing your story. I have a family member that was also unsheltered on and off the streets for about 10 years, and it was in part due to things that you spoke about. It was a different situation. It was addiction. There was some mental health issues involved. But I'm glad to see that your story has been successful, because it's a really challenging thing to overcome. And if nobody's told you, I am very proud of you and your husband, because that is a immense thing in life to not fall victim to. So thank you for sharing that story. And Jonathan, thank you so much for the hard work that went into this. And I'll look forward to updates in the future.
What would the maximum length of stay in the ERF2 project be? Because we talked about a maximum length of stay in the emergency shelters.
Current consideration is for 6 months, but that could be reevaluated.
Okay. I'd like to hear you discuss, or maybe Exodus, the concept of a by name list. We've talked about it. We obviously have each of the individuals that we've talked about. I forget who was specifically made the comment about Carlsbad or another city knowing the story of every person who's suffering homelessness in their community. That was this council's mandate to our staff at the time, before you joined us to manage the program, was to know the story and the name of every individual suffering homelessness in our city. And I think through Exodus that we've achieved that, but I don't know that we've necessarily made that information available in the way that a by name list would. But honestly, I need some expertise in understanding the difference. I mean, we're putting all of the clients that we talk to into HMIS. What would the difference be? Who could speak to that? The difference between putting everybody in HMIS and a by name list that would be accessible to all of our community partners.
I'll start by describing existing efforts towards creating a by name list, and I'll defer to Exodus to talk about the differences between that and the HMIS list. But we have worked very closely with Exodus to develop a by name list. We have a very rough initial draft. There are still some kinks that are being worked out between the database that they hold that is generating the information to something that is digestible and accessible for lay people at all levels. So that should be coming very soon, but that is something that is currently coming close to a presentable draft.
Good, because I do understand that that is best practice. Specifically, and have you watched the initial conversation that this council had when we developed the homelessness strategic plan? Have you gone back and watched some of that?
Yes.
One of the things that all of us spoke extensively about was data collection. And we reiterated that this was probably the most critical element, not because solving homelessness is not the most important thing, but because, like with the program that we've decided not to continue, we need to know what's working and what's not working. And we cannot make policy without accurate information about what's working, what's not working. We need better details. We need granular level detail. We don't need individually identifiable detail. No one's asking for that. But we do need a lot of really good information, more than just broad demographic data. That's not that useful. It's interesting, but it's not useful in the policy decisions that we're making. I've sent both you and Mr. Conley some information from Community Solutions and their discussion about a by name list, and specifically about the kind of data that they feel is best practice to report, including those who are newly identified, which I think we did get at here. We had to do a little bit of math to get there. Those who had returned to homelessness from housing, those who had returned from being considered inactive, those who were actively homeless, and then on the outcome side, the number of housing placements, people who have been moved to inactive, and those who no longer meet the population criteria. So those are some terms that I'm not going to claim I'm an expert on, but they make sense and would provide us a little bit more information about the success of what we're doing. And I think that that is incredibly important. I think for us to be able to gauge the effect and determine the impact of the money that we're spending and how it's actually changing homelessness for particular individuals is a really big deal. So I want to ask you to go back and focus even more on the data based on the direction that this council has provided when we engaged in this program and made these funds available. Because we're close, but we, in my opinion, haven't gotten all the way to where we need to be to meet the mandate that the council issued. I am curious, we have the health workers. We haven't discussed those at a council level before, and I'm curious to know what do they have specific qualifications? They have professional qualifications, licensure, certificates, any specific training? I just want to know more about those roles.
Yeah. So typically, community health workers are individuals who are bringing their lived experience, whether through their own personal with mental health, substance use, or homelessness, or being impacted from a friend and family level. One of the reasons that we also opted to add a community health worker was considering our budget and leveraging the addition of another social worker versus having the support of the community health worker who can help kind of alleviate some of the tasks, allowing these social workers to go be more present during outreach in our communities.
Okay, so they're not necessarily someone with professional credentials, but they're someone that takes care of, I know you said that they maybe provide transportation or they deliver food, those kind of things, so maybe they provide some supporting tasks.
Yes, and we did have the community health workers go through the SOAR training so that they could support with SSI and SSDI applications, as Legal Aid Society gets pretty inundated with those cases, particularly with the county's Homeless Disability and Advocacy Program.
Thank you. I noted that out of the 128 unique individuals we've encountered in the first 6 months of this program year, that we had placed 10, I believe. Did I understand? So we'd referred 10, but how many of the 10 accepted shelter?
According to this information in this chart, it looks like 9 successfully linked. I'll defer to Exodus to discuss this graph a little bit more.
I don't know if we knew the specific number there, but if 10 went to the shelter, I just wanted to point out, because in our last program year, we had a 6% acceptance rate, and this would give us 7.8%. I just want to keep that number fresh.
So this data is a combination of clients who were offered shelter regardless of their phase. So it's both outreach and engagement and those who were enrolled.
Does linked mean that they spent a night in the shelter?
Yes, linked means that they successfully made a linkage to the shelter.
Okay, thank you very much for that. What happened to the families that had more than 5? Not by name, not identifying them, but can you tell us what was the resolution for them? Are they living in their cars? Are they living completely unsheltered?
So I can't speak to all 5 off the top of my head, but I do know that the hotel motel voucher program actually ended up being a really big saving grace for them. We were able to connect those families through other community services for more long-term rental assistance and getting them off their feet. And we were able to place them in bridge housing since shelter would not accept them until they exited to that housing. And then we did have some, I think at least one, that we were able to facilitate family reunification out of state.
Those sound like good outcomes.
Yeah.
If Exodus and our homeless outreach team came across a family tomorrow morning of 6 that needed to be sheltered, do you feel that given the resources available today, that we would be able to get them into a motel voucher and get them into a sheltered situation tomorrow?
So one of the things that differentiates for our O&E and enrolled clients is the ability to access that motel voucher program because it's dependent upon having a housing stability plan. And so we want to make sure that if we're going to put you in a motel, that we have some sort of exit plan for you and that you're not just exiting back to homelessness because you couldn't find anything within your price range, or you couldn't find housing that for fire code violations could accommodate the size of your family. So wanting to consider, the income of the family, do they have the ability to maintain some stability? Can we support them with the rental assistance available, given some of the limitations with like PLHA funds?
Well, let's say they didn't have any income, but they wanted to be rehoused and they were earnest in wanting to participate and be enrolled. How long does it take to enroll someone?
It doesn't take long to enroll someone.
10 minutes, an hour, 3 hours, 2 days?
It depends on each individual need. We have clients who have been in the O&E phase for a full 30 days, and not specifically
But
families.
if a family of 6 was very desirous of being rehoused,
Then we would go ahead and enroll
would
them
it
and
take
try to
less
link
than
them.
8 hours to enroll them?
No, it wouldn't take 8 hours.
Okay. Do you feel that with the resources that are available at your disposal right now, that tomorrow morning, if a family of 6 came to you and said, we want to be housed tonight, do you have resources at your disposal at this exact moment in time to make sure that they don't sleep in their vehicle or unsheltered tomorrow night?
As far as hotel motel program, yes. When it comes to stable housing after that, no.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's an important distinction. I know, I think I speak for all of us here in saying that if that situation exists where you don't have resources for a family of 6, I'm sure we want to know about it immediately. So, because I'm sure we would all want to rectify that. And then that leads to the next question. What about the ERF2 proposal? Are we able to provide one or 4 or some number? Could we I see that you have basically, I'm going to call them pods. You have 4 pods of 6, right? I don't know if you've given them a different name yet. By the way, those structures, we're gonna do some tenant improvements to convert them.
Yeah, not very extensive ones, but we will be able to make sure that they are up to building code.
By the way, $133,000 a piece is an excellent figure given some things we've seen in the news lately. So if you can build units for $133,000, that's an excellent price tag. I'm very pleased with that. Because we heard City of San Diego is buying, motels at $450,000 or roughly that per bed. So that's a good number. But if we're being told that we need housing for large families, I would assume that the parents maybe in one bedroom and 2 or 3 children in each of maybe 2 more rooms. Would it be possible to set one of the floors or pods aside for family housing? Would that be something that would be possible?
That was part of the very early discussions of the proposal. Based on some of the feedback I received from community partners, it may not be advisable due to some safety concerns with the proximity of children and with some individuals that may be of higher acuity needs that we identify in the encampment area.
Okay. Well, then I'll just go back to my previous statement that I know we would want to make funding available. What's the status of our permanent supportive housing? You said that the RFP had been issued and closed. Did we receive responses?
We did receive responses. We've made a preliminary consideration of scorings from the proposals, but no official offer has been made.
Good. Well, it's good to know that we got responses, since we didn't get responses to our previous shelter. Do we call this an emergency shelter, the ERF2? I'm jumping back and forth.
Yes.
Okay. I can certainly see the logic of limiting the length of stay and even saying, assuming there's a limited number of beds, right? We want to build a product that helps somebody get off the street tomorrow And that's super important that we have emergency shelter. And then we need to build the housing that we've all talked about tonight to make sure that there's a place for them to transition to, right? But we don't, I would not like to see this turned into a place where somebody could live for 3 years. Because to my mind, it would be important to turn those beds over and to make sure that we're getting them into a facility that's a permanent housing option. But I think there needs to be a place for somebody to go today that really genuinely wants to get housed and, you know, say, hey, if you're willing to work the program, I have a room of your own for you tonight. And we know, we've been told by Exodus that the motel vouchers have been, you know, they're a great enticement to folks because they know that they're going to have some security. They'll be able to take a larger number of belongings, maybe take a pet, those kind of things. So I think it's super important that we consider that our outreach workers need to have access to beds that they can put people in tonight, rooms. And if we transition this, which is supposed to be emergency shelter, and we make it more of a long-term housing project, I think we're taking that tool away. And so I think we might want to consider the purpose of the emergency shelter being very important. And I would hope that we'll see greater utilization of this, because this is the thing that we've been talking about when we had the conversation about, talking to the microphone so Mr. McCarter can hear me. When we talked about building our ideal shelter, this looks a lot closer to what we talked about. This, I mean, I do want to commend you. I really like the proposal. It looks really solid, and it looks like a place that would be vastly superior, even though I want to still say, for those of us who have toured Haven House and those of us who have toured La Posada, those are not bad facilities. They're good facilities. And certainly La Posada is a really beautiful facility. Haven House has a lot of great service offerings as well. But this would be great if we could, you know, this takes us from 10 beds to, you know, if we keep the 10 beds and we add this, then we're at 34 beds. So this is a giant increase in the amount of beds. And while we talked earlier about the fact that we had not utilized all of our bed nights, certainly a bunk bed is not the same as having your own room. And I would expect to see a much higher rate of utilization. So I want to point that out for the community that's paying attention. We want people to want to go to the shelter, and we want to be able to get them into a permanent housing environment. This is super important, is we need people to voluntarily decide to work the program. Our caseworkers need people to voluntarily decide to work the program, which is why the shelter needs to be emergency, and it needs to be limited in stay, and there need to be barriers to reentry. You have to have encouragement for people to work the program to get to the next place. The shelters are not a place to go to live, and there is a great misunderstanding from the community that they think that we're offering a shelter bed as a place for somebody who's homeless to go and to reside for some indefinite period of time. That's not the purpose of the emergency shelter. It's important for us as a council to keep in mind that, you know, the professionals that have built this system do have a method when it comes to the emergency shelter. It is an inducement to get, you know, off the street, to get warm, to get showered, to get clean, to have some health services, to have a place to receive your driver's license, work with a caseworker every day. Is an important transitional process happening there, but the goal is not for them to be there for a long period of time. And I know also that the service providers want to make sure that if somebody isn't earnestly working the program, that that bed is going to get freed up again so that somebody that wants that opportunity has that opportunity. And that's of critical importance, is that because the system we have right now does not serve people who do not want to be helped. It only serves those who desire and actively work to be helped. And as we saw with Jennifer, sometimes you have to work really hard, and it's not as easy as just calling 211 and saying, I want the help. So people really have to want it, unfortunately. And so we need to make sure that this serves their needs and interests. Councilmember Green, one of your constituents reached out to me, one of yours and mine, to talk about an encampment. We talked about over 100 encampments on private property. And I had reached out to Mr. Conley to ask him if it was possible for us to establish some kind of a fund, not a big fund, but for those property owners that have an encampment that is on their property, we have noticed them a violation of our city code. We are demanding that they clean it up. In some cases, it's many thousands of dollars to hire a professional. The woman who reached out to me said, you know, I don't have a hazmat suit. I can't clean this stuff up. I don't, you know. And as I was thinking about my response to her, the answer was, you know, there's contractors that do this, but then the next thought that came to my mind was it's very expensive. And, you know, how's this woman going to pay for that? Certainly where we have people who have limited financial means, for us to notice them of a violation and demand that they clean it up within 30 days could be a big financial impact. And obviously for 100 of those encampments on private property, for some of those people, it's created a barrier for their ability to resolve the encampment. So I want to put that out there for us to talk about and think about whether or not, you know, maybe we want to have, if you ask for help and if you qualify under certain parameters, maybe we want to offer, not to pay for the whole thing, but maybe we want to offer some acknowledgement of the fact that, you know, in my opinion, government, from the federal government, the state, the county, and the city have all really failed to solve this problem. It's a problem we all own collectively. So to put that problem on a private property owner and say, hey, it's all on you is pretty messed up. So I want us to think about whether or not that's something we should be doing, not with a, you know, I'm thinking with maybe $25,000 or fewer dollars, just so that there's something to offer somebody who is really in need there. The county mental health officer, Dr. Bergman, has let us know, and I've spoken to Mr. Lung and Mr. Conley about the fact that according to county mental health, the board and care product, which is a slightly lesser it's a slightly less level of service from permanent supportive housing. The county has let us know from their mental health staff that that product is in the greatest need right now. And they've asked us to consider whether or not we might want to pursue a product like that instead of a full permanent supportive housing. So I wanted to bring that up and have the opportunity to call that out. I know we want to be responsive to our service providers and our other governmental partners about the specific types of product that they've identified that need to be provided and fill those gaps where we can as a government. I think that's super important. That's all I have. Councilmember Melendez.
Awesome discussion. And I completely agree with you, Mayor, about the value of the encampment resolution grant funding to be used for an emergency shelter. And that's why it's so great that participants have to have a plan, right? They have to have some sort of housing plan for their long-term housing goals, because that those individual units are not for long-term housing. And then there will be an adjacent transitional housing structure for folks to, you know, take steps from, you know, emergency, right, get your documentation in order, you know, be relieved of being at street level homelessness, and then transition. So I say as long as there's you know, case management and a plan in place that does create structure for it to be a short-term product, then I support it being an emergency shelter for sure. I also want to respond to your comments about board and care facilities. I spoke with Dr. Bergman as well, spoke to him about the implementation of care courts and the response to homelessness and mental health as crisis and being very crisis oriented, how that has been limiting in our scope to resolve the conditions of homelessness for many people, because it's an ongoing problem, as we see, with varying degrees of crisis, right? And so, yes, definitely there's a need for board and care. The funding that the state of California has provided for the board and care facilities for the participants that are going to be enrolled in Care Court is not sufficient to produce and staff the board and care facilities. So again, gives me so much grief that the state of California is not backing up these programs to make sure that we have enough of the shelter and the housing facilities and the care facilities and the permanent supportive housing. So I really want to make sure too that we're doing everything that we need to do for permanent housing, because when speaking with Dr. Bergman, he articulated to me that yes, that is important, right? Board and care is a type of housing that is, it's supportive in the sense of if somebody is not able to feed themselves. And permanent supportive housing is definitely a different model, right? So I'd say that board and care really goes to meet the need of those folks that are enrolled in Care Court and meeting those criteria of psychiatric evaluation. And unfortunately, we just don't have the funding to meet their need. So I would be supportive of seeing what we could do, but I also, it's like doing yes and. Like I want to be able to do both, because I think we need the permanent supportive housing. I've heard from the county we need more of that type of housing product. And then clearly we're going to need more boarding care. So it's just a massive beast. And I think based on our plan that we're developing as a city, our strategic plan to address homelessness, you know, over the past couple of years, we have really stepped up and taken more responsibility, because you're right, this has been a failure of government. And I'm not opposed to, you know, looking at private property needs in this regard. I mean, I've had private property owners of, you know, large corporate businesses that have not responded to citations and they were just being irresponsible. I don't think it's appropriate for us to step in those occasions. But if somebody is, you know, has their own individual property, has limited income to resolve the situation, I don't see a reason why we can't support them. We have to weigh it with other priorities as well, because ultimately, there's a lot of priorities when it comes to addressing homelessness. So I appreciate the conversation. I wanted to kind of go back to this conversation that we were having about rental assistance. So O'Donnell, you mentioned, Councilmember O'Donnell, you mentioned rapid rehousing. I'm supportive of rapid rehousing. I know sometimes it can be like programmatically, it can be primarily for housing placement, whereas Deputy Mayor Contreras, you were mentioning, I kind of heard from you that it's really important to be able to provide those like back payments, right? So that someone's like in good standing with their landlord and can like keep their housing, right? So there's kind of different types of programs. There's a rental assistance program that helps someone get into housing. Maybe it helps them on the short term, maybe it helps them on the long term. And then there's the rental assistance program that does both, right? Helps them with their delinquent rental payments, helps them keep their housing. Maybe it's long-term, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year, right? So what I heard, I think I heard a majority from Deputy Mayor and from Councilmember Green that we want to see the continuation of a rental assistance program. So I would like to make a motion, just so that we have it clarified, and provide that direction to staff. I'll make a motion to direct staff to include a rental assistance program in the strategic plan to address homelessness to be available to Vista residents, and investigate all funding sources, including the general fund, grants, and funding sources that are already allocated, and then to bring options back to us for city council approval, right? So very open, and then We can maybe discuss what type of rental assistance program, and we can also discuss how we may want to fund it. But seeing as this was one of the more successful programs that we have had, this homelessness prevention pilot program, the funds have run dry, and it's such a bummer because we know that there's members of the Vista community that could use this resource to retain their housing and prevent homelessness. So I would love to see that brought back for us to consider legitimately adding it to the plan as something stable in there. And that would be my motion and recommendation, and I don't have any further comments from there. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Contreras.
I'll second your motion. My only question was, I didn't talk about the storage program, the need for storage. To my dismay, we have just a proliferation of storage facilities here in the city. Is there anything that we could do to help with some of the existing storage facilities to be able to make this connection of creating a storage program?
Yeah, it's something we've discussed with Exodus as far as potentially partnering with the different private storage companies in the city to assist with these programs, but I might defer to Exodus Recovery to expound on that a little bit, some of the difficulties we faced.
Hi. So the main difficulty that we have had is that whenever we plan on rendering payments of over $600, we have to have a W-9 signed with our vendors. And we have not been able to find any storage facilities here in North County that are willing to sign a W-9 and allow us to be third-party payers on behalf of clients needing storage units. And the cost of a storage unit is quickly going to rack up. One person for like a 5x10 is going to be something around 100, 120, and that one person for 4 months is now going to exceed that $600, and now we can't pay for that for anyone else at that facility for the rest of the year. So that's been our biggest issue, is that we can't find anyone willing to work with us to sign the W-9 so that we can render payments for multiple clients over multiple months.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily want more storage facilities, but if one came forward, if there was a proposal that came forward for a storage facility, could we put as one of the, if they needed a special use permit or some kind of condition, could we put that as a condition? I don't know who wants to answer that one between legal and the city manager.
No, we don't have the ability to condition a private owner to do that.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we need to figure out something. I mean, the city has land. I don't know, if we need to necessarily build like a huge, like maybe there's a modified way for storage, right? Where you really have to like condense it down to a smaller amount, but I would love to see us get creative and see what we could do as a city if we can't force anybody else to do it, that maybe we take a look at that. And hopefully a low cost way to do that, I think could be really beneficial. Thank you. That's all for me. Thanks.
I don't see any other speakers. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. That item passes unanimously. Seeing no other requests to speak, we are adjourned.